We're live.
Oh, we're live. Good stuff. All right. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of VR Download. In case you're new, each week we meet here in virtual reality using the latest technology to discuss the next generation of personal computing. Hi, I'm your bespectacled host today, Kyle Riesenbeck, filling in for Ian Hamilton, who is not here. I'm joined by my colleague, David Heaney, here in our very own proprietary Upload Virtual Studios. We are broadcasting live on YouTube, so feel free to post comments and questions during the show. VR Download is also syndicated to all podcast platforms. And if you would like this type of quality programming to continue, we need your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing Upload content. You could also subscribe to the site and get an ad-free experience for a very, very low price. $3.99? Is that what we're doing, David? $3.99? Is that what it is? That's cheap for an ad-free experience. It's pretty good. We'd also like to thank our UploadVR patrons for being just super, super fans of our site and want to support us as much as possible. So our patrons currently are XR Developer News. Thank you. Podum from Smash Drums Developer. Thank you. HoloNet. Thank you. Mike Manzano. Thank you. Richard Meller. Thank you. I love this one. Parmesan. Thank you. And Qubits. Thank you all very much for your support and patronage. If you'd like to be on this list, there's a way to do that. Just go subscribe and join as a patron. Okay, so that's all the the general stuff we do every show. Game to be awesome, and I know that we're going to talk about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we have 8 topics today. The first is Civ 7 VR. We normally don't talk about games on this show, but we will briefly discuss this just because of the kind of technical issues around this and the significance of that title. Then we'll talk about the developer that got PlayStation VR2's eye tracking working on PC. Very significant since Sony doesn't offer that as part of its Steam VR driver. We'll then talk about Quest 3 on airplanes. So Lufthansa, the airline, has been trialing giving some business class passengers a Quest 3 for the duration of their flight. And that has actually won a Best In-Flight Entertainment Award. And the feedback from passengers there is so good that Meta now plans to expand that to other airlines. We'll then talk about Quest version 76, Horizon OS v76. It adds a useful accessibility feature, live captions, and it also makes an extremely controversial change. It no longer lets you uninstall Horizon Worlds. We will definitely dig into that and get all of your opinions on that. We'll then talk about 2 Apple stories. One is that DaVinci Resolve, the kind of popular editing software that's used for Hollywood movies and such, now supports editing Apple Immersive video. And so combined with Blackmagic's camera that's releasing very soon, there's going to be a whole end-to-end production pipeline now available for people other than Apple to make Apple Immersive video. We'll then talk about that report from that Chinese outlet that claims, and that's the key word, that Apple Vision Pro 2 mass production has begun. So the successor to Apple Vision Pro could potentially maybe have started mass production. We'll then talk about Pico Motion Tracker Waist version. What a name, but basically this adds a third tracker to the Pico Motion Tracker system, one around your waist instead of just around your ankles. And together, these 3 standalone headsets and their mobile chipsets are a lot more powerful than some people give them credit for. And it also hints at maybe what might happen on Valve's Deckard headset potentially. We'll talk about all that because that is just, again, a remarkably impressive piece of work there and could have a hints about what we might expect from standalone VR in the future.
So before we get started here, yeah, I'm Gray. I'm Kyle the Gray. I am not Gray Kyle. I liked the Kyle Reason Black. That was funny. Whoever said that in the chats. It's Free V Real Estate said that. That's funny. I see some regulars here in the chat. Onakazi is here. F Meister 94, Kansas City Chiefs Production, Arlen, CJ7, Parmesan is here. Yes. All right. Good stuff. So this is going to be a lot of fun because I've got several opinions and comments to make on some of this stuff. But David, just take us into it however you want to. This is going to be fun.
Sure. So I do see some people saying that they're seeing some stream issues on our end. We're seeing perfect connection on OBS. YouTube says stream is perfectly healthy. There's nothing we can really do about that, unfortunately. Interestingly, Mark Zuckerberg is a huge fan of this series. And so you can see why maybe he had a part in getting this to come over to Quest 3 and 3S. It is only for Quest 3 and 3S. But this had a kind of strange launch where it was supposed to officially come out today by what we've seen from Meta's announcements today, but it actually went live last night and a lot of people have tried it. And so for some people, it works fine. For others, they're getting this really strange head stuttering issue as if there's something wrong with your positional tracking, but it's not because you can try other apps and there's nothing wrong with the tracking. I actually didn't experience this issue, but Dawn, who's in our comments and on our team, did experience this issue. And so it's kind of one of those things where we're not really sure what exactly causes it. However, what makes this story interesting for me is that apparently, if you switch your Quest headset's tracking frequency from automatic to 60 hertz, that will actually fix it for some people. That's very, very interesting. And if you're not familiar with what the tracking frequency is, there are like two, how do I put this? There's two different
standards,
settings, 50 hertz and 60 hertz.
Yeah.
And the reason that this is because the lighting frequency, the actual electrical frequency of different countries is different. So in some countries, your lighting is flickering at, 50 hertz, at others it's at 60 hertz. So what this suggests to me is that something in this game is running at 60 times per second instead of taking in the tracking at the right time. I mean, even then, it doesn't really make sense to do it like that because generally you would sample the tracking each frame and it wouldn't really matter when you get it. It's really, really strange that would actually do anything in a game. It shouldn't. What the developer gets should be irrelevant to that because the system provides you tracking poses at 1,000 hertz. That setting only chooses what do the cameras sample tracking at. How these tracking systems work is that they mostly actually use the accelerometer and gyroscope, the IMU, the little IMU chip, and then the optical system is kind of just used to correct the drift. But from moment to moment, from millisecond to millisecond, it's actually the IMU, which again, all of this is irrelevant to the developer, or at least should be, because they just get, whenever they ask for it, a latest pose that involves a little bit of prediction, a little bit of IMU usage, and then kind of is based off the last camera sample. So really bizarre that would fix it for people. I can't verify because I haven't done it myself. But hopefully they can get this fixed. There's other complaints about this. There's other performance issues. There's people saying that the whole format is kind of a little bit uncomfortable. The way that you move around doesn't seem to quite work. The feedback on this game isn't great so far. I think it's on 3.5 stars on the Quest store. We'll have to see. We do plan to have a full review, and I think Dawn is going to stream it tomorrow.
Yeah, Dawn's either going to stream it tonight or this afternoon, or we're not really sure. But I'm, again, as a tried and true fan of this series, and knowing that this game was coming out and being excited for it, and then I hear bad stuff, but I still want to go play. I don't know, David. I'm looking at this screenshot and I've been watching all of the tweets and comments about it. Everybody seems to be focusing on parts of this that are, I don't know how to explain this. I don't want to only focus on the fact that it's VR. Like, I want to focus on the fact that this is actually a playable game inside this unit. I mean, ignore the novelty of it being a VR experience. Like, one of I can't remember who exactly posted on Twitter, but somebody put that they want to know which we were more excited for. Are we more excited for the war room or the map? And I'm like, nobody cares about the war room being in VR. I mean, and again, I know different people have different experiences with this game, but I can't wait to see if there is any value to adding this game in VR, because sometimes, and I have a comment later when we get to the airplane stuff, but there are certain games that I don't care where I'm sitting or what my situation is. I don't want to have to play it in VR. So I'd be curious to see if this actually adds to gameplay or not.
Yeah, well, to be clear, despite being called Civ 7 VR, this is really an XR game. You can play in either virtual reality, where you're in this kind of war room, or in mixed reality, where it's just this table in your real room, and then you're aware of your environment and you can talk to people, etc. So you can toggle between VR and MR at any time. Just to pick up on a comment here, by the way, yes, there is a. I said that there were two settings for tracking. Really, there are two settings on the headset's underlying technical level, but to you as a user, it'll be set to automatic by default, and based on your geography, it'll figure out what the right hertz is. You should never have to think about that and never set it. And again, it's so bizarre that this would ever affect an actual game. It shouldn't. There's something very wrong happening here on an underlying technical level. If that fix is real, sometimes these fixes and whether they're real, it just comes down to placebo. But maybe it is real. But yeah, just to come back to Civ 7, I did try this briefly. I do think it is genuinely interesting to see the board in front of you and in 3D to get that kind of extra sense of depth. The issue, I think, is that we're still in this era where these headsets are relatively front heavy. So you have to always be looking down. And that's the kind of worst case scenario because all of the weight is then more accentuated. It's coming, the lever is more downwards. Whereas if you were like looking up at something, it's a lot better. So I don't know. It does feel if you could tilt the board up, it would be a lot nicer and kind of have it at an angle. But as it
If
is
I
right now, the controls feel weird. I really
Yeah.
did like some of the games on Vision Pro, like Gears and Goo, where you don't have to kind of stretch forward with your controllers. You can lean back a little bit and just use your eyes and gaze and pinch to control. I think that would probably suit this game a lot better. And having to kind of actively move your hands and controllers around isn't for me personally in this kind of title. But again, we have a review in the works from our games people that I'm not the games person. It's just my view.
David, if you put the board up in front of you vertical, the boats will fall off the. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, it would feel weird, right, to have it. It is a little bit curved in VR, to be clear. It's ever so slightly curved.
Not like the real world, which is flat.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is completely flat here, right? I meant it's a little bit tilted, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I feel
I can't wait to try this. Honestly, it's driving me nuts that it's
sure.
out
I
and I
mean,
haven't tried it yet.
again, the other issue is because this is on a standalone mobile chipset, and this is the developer that's probably not really very familiar with it. The graphics aren't incredible. At least the resolution feels a little bit low. You wonder if they could push that a little bit with more optimization. This feels rushed. The fact that they would launch this like this with this real head stuttering issue suggests to me that they did not do very wide QA because you have a lot of people that seem to be experiencing this. It does seem that, like, from my anecdotal experience of just talking to people in the industry that have tried this game, it seems to be about 50-50. Although, again, that is completely anecdotal. It could be a lot less than that. You just think this is the kind of thing that would get caught in QA.
Well, yeah, I guess I'll have to be the forefront authority on whether or not this is worth playing. So stay tuned to hear my opinion. Don is in the chat and is saying that he's never played a Civ game ever, and he's going to try to stream it. Yeah, we're going to need a lot of people in the audience helping him along the way. He's going to need a lot of hand holding. If you've never played Civ before, and this is your first Civ experience, yeah, that could be interesting. Not really sure how that's going to go. So I guess time will tell. And this feels like one of those games. Remember No Man's Sky when it came out? It was, and now it's like one of my favorite games to play. So, they could evolve it. It could be better. I'm doubting it, but
yeah, we'll see. I mean, if you look at this image here, even what you see here is this person playing standing because that's where it makes most sense to kind of look down. And another reason that I don't think that kind of works well is that Civ is the kind of game you want to play for multiple hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours at a time for a full session. Other people will play it not so much. But you're going to run into the battery life issue of a headset quite quickly. So obviously, what's the solution to that? You just plug your headset in, right? Either to power or to an external battery, a Bobo battery, whatever it happens to be. but that doesn't really kind of, if you're plugging it into power, if you're the average Quest owner who doesn't have all of these external batteries, that's something you're going to want to do seated. But then seated, it kind of feels awkward to lean over to. It just, something feels slightly off about this in a way that didn't with some other RTSs that have been in VR. And I wonder if they could just tweak the controls a little bit, but we'll have to see.
I'm wondering why. Okay, and maybe I'm being dumb here. Is there a desktop VR version?
No, that's something that you mean PC VR?
Yeah. Why isn't
No.
there a PC VR version?
Well, very likely because this was funded by Meta, right? That Meta paid for this to come into existence. This is not developed by the same developer as the flat version. They've ported it over a specific VR developer, and that developer has been paid by Meta to bring this to Quest 3 and 3S.
But
a lot of the time, Meta's things are like not your exclusive forever. Usually it's, you have to get this out. You have to do a certain amount of months of QA or post-launch improvements. And then you can go and do whatever you want, right? So they maybe a year down the line, they can bring this to PC VR. But the answer to your question is because Valve didn't pay them to bring it to Steam.
Boo. Boo. That's all I can say. Boo.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like because of maybe some of the technical issues here, this would suit PC better. Civ is, you may not think this intuitively, but it is quite a demanding game, especially on the CPU side. And I think they've kind of toned some of that down here by only showing you a certain amount of the board at a time. That's also a kind of huge issue. It would be, some people in the comments have suggested, could you imagine if you could see the entire board at once and it was kind of on your living room floor or something like that, or just on a kind of Google Earth style view of the entire map. But standalone hardware doesn't quite have the computing power for that quite yet. And that's the limit. Another thing Ian suggested is, which I thought you meant when you said desktop VR, is the ability to switch into the traditional game at any time. It'd be kind of very, very interesting if you could bring this up to a giant flat screen and go and play the traditional Civ, and then when you want, come back into immersive mode.
Yes,
I feel like
it'd be good too.
Yeah, that would certainly be interesting. And you can do that today, right? If you have Steam Link or Virtual Desktop or an app like that, you can do that with your PC or your Steam Deck. But it's not something you can do standalone on Quest.
Well, I guess time will tell, kind of makes me wonder too, though, if you've got a big flat map on the ground, you could do that whole Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, the old TV game show where you had to run around and put the flags. I'm showing my age. Nobody's going to remember that show.
Yeah, I don't get the reference, but I think I get what you mean. And it would be, I really thought that that's an underexplored idea, to take an RTS like this and put it over your entire living room floor. Some people wouldn't have the space for that, others would. I think that would be super interesting, especially when you kind of have mixed reality there. So I guess this is something that will happen over time as you get more computing power in standalone. In mixed reality, especially on a Quest headset, developers actually have less CPU and GPU resources than they do in full VR, because when you're sampling the pass-through cameras, that's generating extra heat and energy that pushes against the heat and energy generated by the CPU and GPU. So, maybe one day we see an upgraded version of this on Quest 4. Maybe we see it come to PC VR. We'll have to see.
Yeah, that and GTA. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about our next story. This one is another example of a story that is a developer's ingenuity. This is a kind of software developer, not a specific game developer. And what they've managed to do here is get PlayStation VR2's eye tracking actually working on PC VR, which is just remarkable. So this comes from a developer that goes by the handle What the Hopper, and they release open source PC VR software on GitHub. So in the past, they released Oculus Killer 3 years ago, which is a tool that bypasses Oculus Dash when you're using Quest Link and goes straight to Steam VR. Very cool. That was before Steam Link existed. So super cool and interesting. More recently, they've been working on projects like Relink to VR and Oculus WRP. These are kind of similar ideas, getting rid of the Oculus software, meaning you don't even need to have the Oculus runtime to use Quest Link directly. Again, very interesting stuff. So now their project here is Driver X, and it's an extension for Sony's Steam VR driver for PlayStation VR2. If you're not familiar with the situation of PSVR 2 on PC, Sony added a driver for it last year, and released an adapter so that if you don't have a virtual link port on your GPU, which the vast majority of GPUs don't, you can actually plug that into your PC, PSVR 2. But the driver is missing support for PlayStation VR 2's standout features. Eye tracking is not there. HDR is not there. Headset rumble is not there. Adaptive triggers is not there. Although the developer of the VR game Cactus Cowboy did get the adaptive triggers working back in September. So you can use adaptive triggers, but that kind of requires a paid third-party tool, is how that was implemented. But the main one that people really want is eye tracking for obvious reasons, right? You can get driving your avatar's eyes in VR chat, so that rich social expressivity. You can do foveated rendering in some of the titles that are starting to support that now. We talked last week about Flight Simulator 2024, DCS, these heavy flight sims adding support for eye-tracked foveated rendering. So the fact that you would get PlayStation VR 2 supporting eye tracking through this third-party open source tool that's coming soon is super significant. So currently this is still a work in progress, but they're making remarkable progress on this and should have it soon. And the significance of this is hard to understate, hard to overstate. Basically, right now, unless you can find like a used Quest Pro, Pimax Crystal, or Vario Aero at a good price, the only headsets with eye tracking on PC cost in excess of $2,000. And soon there'll be the Beyond 2E, the big screen Beyond 2E, that will cost $1,200. But then you need base stations on top of that, which is $1,500, right? Pimax Crystal Super, $1,800. These are expensive headsets that get you eye tracking. With this, when this tool becomes available, it's $400 plus the adapter and cables. So under $500 for an eye-tracked PC VR headset. That's just astonishing. And again, this is going to be a free and open source tool. You won't have to pay for it, and you'll have access to the source code so you know exactly what's running on your PC. So really good work here from What the Hopper.
I need to point out something that this company's first project was called Oculus Killer. Is that correct? Yeah. Hey, they did it. Good job. Now I do want to point out though that we had a Quentin M, who has been a member for 30 months. Wow, thank you. Quentin says, I went back to PSVR for Hitman, but I got lightheaded. What is PSVR 2 doing differently than Quest 3 to make me lightheaded? I'm guessing reprojection. Want to take a stab at that, David?
Sure. So there's two things going on there. One, indeed, is their reprojection. So they're doing, in certain apps, 60 to 120. I'm actually not familiar off the top of my head what Hitman is doing, but 60 to 120 seems very likely. And the thing about PlayStation VR 2 is that it doesn't really do positional reprojection. It's only rotational. So it's as if your actual positional movement and the movement of objects in the world is being updated at only 60 hertz. And that is known to give you motion sickness or lightheadedness. The other thing, it could be the persistence. PSVR 2, its OLED panels have a slightly higher persistence than Quest 3. And so that refers to the amount of time for each frame that the display is illuminated. And we've discussed this before in this show, but it actually sounds crazy if you've never heard of this. But for the majority of time that you're wearing your VR headset, the display is dark. It is not actually emitting light. The majority of each frame, it is off. And you're like, hang on, what? But I don't see that. It looks like it's on. Well, what happens is that each frame, it pulses the image for a small percentage of the frame, then keeps it off until the next frame, and then pulses the image again. But because this is happening so quickly at either 70 on a Quest, say 72, 80, 90, 120, or in a PSVR 2, either 90 or 120, because even in reprojection mode, the display is still refreshing at either 90 or 120. Because that's happening so quickly, your brain sees this as one continuous image. And why is this done? Because if you keep the image illuminated for the entire frame, then as you move your head, you would be seeing the same light from that original position. And your brain would say, hang on, why when I turn my head, am I still seeing the light as if my head wasn't turned? And so think about the literal visual of that. You're seeing the same thing as your head turns. It's smear. So you get motion smear, this kind of blur that is happening. And you see that with the persistence. But I think that's probably not what's making you like lightheaded. It's more likely to be the reprojection. And so we've said on this podcast before that it's disappointing that the 60 to 120 mode is used at all, given how bad it is. And we would strongly encourage developers to use 90 native, where it's 90 render, 90 display, no reprojection. And even if that means that they have to lower the graphical fidelity, and so it looks worse in screenshots and videos, and when someone's streaming it on YouTube, it looks a bit worse to third parties, it will feel better to the person in the headset, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, no, that's a good. It's a good explanation. If you've never seen a really fast camera, like thousands of frames per second, watching a light bulb turn on or an LED, it's not instant, and so there is this small amount of turning on, turning off, turning on, turning off of the light. And if you only turn it on for a fraction of the time and then turn it off immediately, yeah, it would be really weird to see that, the flicker. I was trying to explain to my daughter the other day, she's like, I'm watching this old movie and why is the TV like rolling flicker in the background? I'm like, oh, and I had to explain hertz and refresh rate and the way that TV scan line work and everything. And, she's 14. So the whole time she's just like it doesn't make any sense. But I don't know. Things you don't take, you don't consider. That's interesting. There is quite a lot of people talking in here. Low persistence, Onakazi. Okay. Oculus will never die. Well, Don, we'll see.
Yeah, so on the flicker thing, it's interesting that some people at 72 hertz, which is the lowest that a Quest will do, at least that you're allowed to do on the store, will actually see the flicker. You'll see it in bright scenes in the periphery. That's you actually noticing that this is constantly flickering on and off instead of being on the entire time. But at 80, almost no one can see it. At 90, essentially no one can see it. It would be an extreme rarity for someone to see it at 90. At 120, no one can see it.
Yeah.
But that's not what will be happening on PSVR 2, to be clear. Again, it's always 90 or 120. It's just the fact that this is being reprojected. And so maybe we'll explain what we mean by reprojection for people that don't know, that you have three modes developers can choose from on PSVR 2. 60 to 120, 90 native, and 120 native. So 60 to 120 means that the game is rendering at 60 frames per second. And then the system is skewing the image each other frame instead of presenting a real image. So between the real frames that are getting generated, those 60 frames per second, you have these synthetic frames. And on some systems, like on Quest, on PC VR, on Steam VR, for example, that's also an option, but it's done in a lot better way that also takes into account the motion going on. So the motion of objects and the motion of your headset positional tracking. But on PlayStation VR 2, it appears to only be rotational. So it's only the rotation of your head that's getting reprojected. So the rotation only reprojection is what we really should say is the problem on PSVR 2. And again, if a developer chooses native 90 or native 120 on PSVR 2, this isn't an issue. It's not inherent to the headset. It's that so many apps choose this 60 frames per second mode. Why do they choose that? Because it's easier to hit and they can, show better graphics, higher fidelity graphics. They don't have to downgrade assets from the traditional flat screen version. It's used for a bunch of stuff. Horizon Call of the Mountain, Resident Evil 8, a bunch of different high fidelity games. Whereas your kind of more low fidelity games, your Job Simulator and things like that are kind of either native 90 or native 120. So interestingly, as we've talked about late last year, there is a positional reprojection feature that seems to be available for the PS5 Pro console. And it's an option available in Gran Turismo 7, that one app, but we still don't know, is this something that Sony added as part of the SDK? Can any developer do this? Or is this only for GT7 that they've developed this? But again, that would be exclusive to PS5 Pro. So if you have the base PS5, it's not going to ever be an option for you unless they figure out how to get that working on that older hardware. So it's it's tough.
I
It's
feel like
difficult.
what you're saying, David, is it's not your hardware, but how you use it.
Yes, exactly. It's the developers are choosing graphical fidelity over smoothness, and it's something that happens in the wider industry, right? You see a lot of flat screen console games choosing 30 FPS with shiny graphics over 60. It's not as important on a flat screen TV, though it's still very damn important. But it's critical in VR because it's literally your head movement, right? Like unless you're keeping your head perfectly still, it matters a lot in VR and your hand movement, right? Because that 60 real frames means that that's the actual hand latency, right? Your hands aren't being magically updated, right? Your hand positions are being rendered 60 times per second. So I see a comment here from RG. If it can't hit 90 FPS, it's not a VR game. And, I agree with that. Just cut the graphics, make it look worse. The reason I think they won't do this, and again, this is the cynical side of me, but I think it's because it doesn't look so good in screenshots and in videos and when Twitch streamers are streaming it. So their audience here for their actual core technical decision isn't the person in the headset, it's the person in the Twitch chat, and that's disappointing.
But David, but the game's going to look like a kid's game. It looks like a toy. It looks so stupid. It's not advanced. It needs to have great graphics to be a good VR game. These are the things we hear, and they're not right. Quality it adds value, not the performance adds value. A good game doesn't have to have good graphics. I mean, look at What the Bat. What the Bat was a fantastic game. Graphics were too simple. Nobody understood why that was a good game. Still is, by the way.
Yeah, I broadly agree there. And I think one thing that a comment here is bringing up is interesting. I agreed with the commenter that if it doesn't run at 90, it's not a real VR game. 90 was too specific there. I meant if it doesn't run at a headset native refresh rate frame per second, it's not real VR, right? So one thing Sony could do here, for example, is introduce a fourth option, a 72, a 75, an 80 hertz native option for the headset, just like you have on Quest, on Big Screen Beyond, on even the Valve Index. You can bring it down. It's the refresh rate is optional there. The difference is on PC VR, you're the one choosing. On console VR and Quest, the developer is choosing.
David, are you advocating for an 80 hertz refresh rate?
Yeah, I mean, it's available on Quest. It's an option on Quest. Nobody even seems to ever talk about it. There's 72 and there's 90.
Right.
Also 80.
But 80?
It's
80?
Yes, it's been there the whole time.
Really?
Yep.
What's the advantage because 80 is not divisible by it's not a does that work?
So yeah. It doesn't work well for media if you're showing a video like
right.
That was captured at 24 or 30. But if you're in a VR game, of course it works. You can run it at whatever you want, right? As long as it's high enough to not cause like issues. And it's a really good midpoint because a lot of games choose 72 on Quest because they can't hit 90 because their kind of graphical fidelity is too high, and a lot then go all the way to 90 and have to make too many sacrifices with graphical fidelity. 80 is a nice middle spot, and by 80 the majority of people can't see the flicker anyway, which gets rid of the 72 issue, and it's smoother than 72, not quite as smooth as 90. But I hope Sony introduces this on PlayStation VR2. Not that they will.
Wow. See, learned something new today. I love it.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting discussion around this. Interesting that we got completely off our main topic, which is PlayStation VR2 on PC, and went back to talking about PSVR2 on console. But interesting stuff, and it was a good comment to point out that, why am I getting like a headache using PSVR2? So I guess something I should point out then to bring it back to our PSVR2 on PC discussion is because this isn't something wrong with the headset itself. This won't be an issue on PC because on PC, you can toggle between 90 and 120 for this headset. And then whether you can run that is up to your GPU. How much have you spent on your graphics card? If you've got the right graphics card and you're playing the right game and you can run the performance, you don't have to worry about this at all. Steam VR does have its own reprojection system called motion smoothing. And if you enable it, it kicks in automatically whenever you can't make frame rate and does, half frame rate. So either 45 to 90 or 60 to 120. But as I said before, it's a lot better than the one on PS5. it actually takes positional movement into account, which really, really matters. It's the technical aspect, if anyone's interested, is motion vectors. So the past frame, you have like instead of just the color buffer and the depth buffer, you also have a motion vector buffer where each pixel has a kind of direction of where it's flowing over time, and the system uses that to extrapolate forward.
So I'm looking at the chat here. LL just joined, says, "Hey, all, just joining now. No time traveling. What have I missed?" David, let's start over the whole show so LL can catch up.
Welcome to VR.
Just kidding. Yeah. Okay, so PSVR, we're going to keep seeing updates to it, and that's cool to know that they are trying to.
It's not them. It's that third-party people are doing it. Sony hasn't done a thing here. And we should probably quickly ask, why hasn't Sony done it? The speculation that makes most sense to me is that it's Tobii. So they use this third-party company, a European startup called Tobii, to do their eye tracking. Tobii provides the eye tracking technology in PSVR2, and there's very likely a licensing cost for that. So per headset, Sony is paying Tobii a certain amount of money. And I wonder if I think the most plausible explanation is that license says per PS5, not just per headset, and then the license doesn't cover the idea of this also being used on PC, and they would have to pay maybe more. And Sony's, we're not going to.
Interesting. Well, that's fine. I mean, Tobii's been around for a lot longer than it was incorporated into the PSVR. So
yep, they did eye tracking for a bunch of other headsets.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Though notably, they didn't do it for Quest Pro. They're not doing it for Apple Vision Pro. Meta and Apple developed their own eye tracking technology, whereas pretty much everyone else uses Tobii or another company that provides something similar to Tobii.
So funny.
David Bigelow's is bringing up an interesting idea that maybe because Tobii does provide the eye tracking for some of these enterprise headsets, that perhaps they don't want people to be able to buy a cheap PSVR 2 and have eye tracking on PC, because then that takes away from the licensing money they're getting from those headsets. And I think that comes back to what we're saying. Like, once this open source software is available from this very impressive software developer, PSVR 2 becomes a less than $500 eye track PC VR headset. We've never seen that before. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but has there been a less than $500 new eye tracked PC VR headset with 2K OLED panels and a good wide field of view and inside out tracking and track controllers? It's remarkable. So we'll keep an eye on when this actually does release, and we'll of course report that, and then you can download it onto your headset.
Yeah, it's a good point, David. That's a darn good point.
Let's talk about our next topic. This one brings us into the air, and this is Quest 3 provided as in-flight entertainment. So this is a trial, a pilot run, pun intended, that started last year between Meta and Lufthansa, the German airline. And so far, almost 4,000 business class customers have found that when they sit down into their seat, they're offered a Quest 3 that is preloaded with, entertainment, movies, games, and like 360 immersive experiences that show them interesting destinations on the planet. And so according to Meta and Lufthansa, the feedback here has been incredibly positive. They also won the airline industry's Best In-Flight Entertainment Award for 2025, for last year. And they say that they are so thrilled with this positive feedback that they are going to bring it to other airlines and expand it in general. And so Lufthansa have also said, we are thrilled with the success of this initiative and the positive feedback from our passengers. Immersive technology is undoubtedly an element in the future of in-flight entertainment. So this is obviously possible thanks to the travel mode that Meta added last year. That travel mode means that Quest headset tracking can work on moving vehicles like airplanes and trains. And as I've said so many times on this podcast before, headsets are an ideal way to spend time when you're stuck in the air, especially on very long flights between continents, for example. Instead of being confined to that little dim LCD, at the back of the seat in front of you, you get an enormous, giant cinema screen that can play, 3D movies. You also can play games, you can get work done, you can do the kind of immersive virtual traveling they're talking about here, and all of it completely privately. No one can lean over and look at what you're doing. No one can see that confidential report you're working on for the big business move you're going to do next week. No, kid can zoom into your messages to your wife and post them on TikTok for some reason. It's completely private to you. And yeah, I think it also takes you out of that, you know, tin can in the air that you're in that is not exactly the most pleasant environment to be in, and brings you to wherever you want to be. So it's clear that others that have tried this like it. I've always said it's great in economy class, but this trial is showing it's even better than business class. I expect that over time, as these headsets get slimmer and lighter and more capable, you're going to see a lot of people bring their own onto planes anyway. And I've already seen that in a few flights, actually. I've seen some people with the Vision Pro. I've seen some people actually with their Quest 3, and I've seen some X-Real as well on flights. Very rarely, only like one per flight I'm talking about here, but you do start to see it. But until then, until this becomes something that people own, it does make sense for airlines in some cases to actually just give people one for the duration of the flight, especially when it comes preloaded with everything they need.
So CJ7 in the chat says there still needs to be an MR experience where your seat drops down through the plane and you are sitting below the plane with that view being fed to the headset. I am reminded of George Carlin, where they tell him to get on the plane and he goes, "Forget that." That's not what he said. He said, "Forget that. I'm getting in the plane. You can get on the plane. I'm getting in the plane." And that's pretty funny to me, but I would love to be able to see. I've flown out of, cities like, Seattle, where you see Mount Rainier or the Space Needle. And it would be really fun to fly out of some of these major airports. New York, I would imagine, would be pretty fun. Paris, Boston, different places where if you could see out, not just the window, but you could actually see the whole experience in the bottom. Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love that.
That would be cool, and it's technically possible if they did have cameras in the right locations on the plane, to get this kind of like synthesized external pass-through view. It's something they have. I'm not sure if it's actually implemented yet, but it definitely is planned for the F-35 fighter jet. The pilots are already able to, using their head-mounted display, look down and see through the plane. Again, not sure if they've deployed it, but it is definitely part of the program. I've read it as part of the spec. And so Paradise Decay is pointing out that some big planes already have cameras on them. I know some do have it on the front, and then you can kind of see a front view. But it would be interesting to see like the entire bottom of the plane have a camera like that. And some of the ideas people are coming up with here of, as you say, crashing through the plane or something like that. I'm not sure if I quite like that one, but being able to see through it would be incredible. But I do think it would be a bit of a novelty, other than when you're maybe taking off and landing. The majority of the time, you're going to want to be, in that cinema experience. And even right now, if you're a Quest owner in this audience, you can install the Amazon Prime Video app from the Horizon store for free onto your Quest and download movies and TV shows onto it and put your Quest on a plane, and you can spend that entire flight in your own virtual cinema. If there are obviously other ways to get files directly onto your Quest that aren't exactly as legal, but that some people do. But I mean, even without having to do anything like that, without having to involve a PC or any USB, you can do this directly on your Quest. Also, if an airline has, like a LAN video system that some of these do, where they kind of have like a network media server that you can connect in from your tablet or your phone, you can do this in your Quest browser too. If they have that movie, you can go and access this. And I've said this before, and I'm going to be a broken record on this, but the biggest limitation I still think is the aesthetics of the headset. I personally strongly believe that Quest 3 is an ugly design. This whole kind of triclops thing going on in the front is just awful. It is not the kind of thing that you want to wear in public. Whereas the Vision Pro, for example, I think people are a lot more willing to wear in public when it's kind of this sleek black visor that doesn't show all these kind of bulging out cameras. And so some of this is just because Vision Pro is 7 times the price and can kind of have a better industrial design. But another part of it is just Meta's choices. They have chosen to make this a white headset. They have chosen to have these kind of sensors be very visible. A lot of that was Meta's design philosophy, that you need to show everyone the cameras. It's a the worst thing in the world is if someone standing beside you doesn't know that the mixed reality headset you're wearing has cameras that can see them. And if they don't know that, this is the biggest privacy scandal in the world. I think they're probably over that now that Vision Pro has just said, screw it, we're going to hide the cameras behind a sleek black visor. And also just the fact that people know what mixed reality headsets are now because of Vision Pro. People understand that if you're wearing these things, there will be times where you can see them. And, a lot of the time you'll just figure that out by asking the question, can you see me? And I think we're likely to see Quest 4 have a lot sleeker design that you would be happy to wear in a plane rather than this thing, which it hasn't mattered until now. It doesn't matter what the headset looks like when you're sitting in your room alone, when you're playing VR games in your house, even when you're watching media in bed. Your wife, your husband, your whatever, your kids, they're not going to care much that it looks weird. But when you're doing this in public, it has to look sleek. It has to look nice. And Quest 3 just doesn't.
Yeah, it's a little, bleh looking. So we have I guess this is a super chat. Cheese is Nasty wants to know, did y'all see Meta building its own internet to push VR forward more? They said bandwidth needs to be solved. I'm not really sure exactly what he's talking about. I did see that Meta is building a new data center in Ohio, but other than that, I haven't seen anything else.
I think this is likely referring to the undersea cables the companies like Meta build, because this is one of those things where to expand the global capacity of the internet as more and more countries are coming online. Literally billions of people every few years are coming online. It's important to make sure that the actual global backhaul of the internet has capacity. So that's something that companies like Meta are very interested in, because when you are used by 3 billion people, which is what Meta is, right? Facebook has 3 billion monthly active users. The only way to expand is in many ways to countries where people literally are not yet online. And so you see Meta and Google and other companies that are at scale partnering with like telecoms in developing countries, trying to reduce the cost of smartphones there, reduce the cost of data plans, and build out capacity. And that's kind of why Meta is interested in that.
I can't not call out this comment. Phobie82 cannot wait to play Richie's plane crash experience. That's brilliant. I love that. It's probably the funniest thing I've heard so far today. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, get your headset, go on a plane, and have a better experience. It's pretty good.
I remember one of the games for the Oculus DK2, the developer kit 2, was this experience. I shouldn't say game, it was a demo where you're on a plane and then it kind of falls apart and you crash. And
right.
Asunder, I think it was called, something like that.
I remember that. I think I did that on an old stream. Yeah. No, I was going to make a comment about this experience. In the article, it's like, okay, well, you could play things like chess and checkers and stuff. And I'm like, neat. Like, that's not really the best use case for a piece of technology like this to play chess and checkers. But I guess you have to have those things available too for the neophytes.
I think it would be somewhat interesting, right? You see people play these games already on the little seats on the back of the plane, right? Why not have it in 3D? I would play chess.
I think the Venn diagram of the type of person who would play chess or checkers on an airplane, the back of their seat in front of them, and the person who would use a headset, I don't think that there's a very large overlap there. But hey, I could be wrong. I'm just being judgy and
yeah. I think part of this program is that they're given the headset anyway, right? These airlines for business class customers for now. Maybe someday it's something that economy gets to, or maybe by then people already own headsets. They just get given one and they kind of try this out. Yeah, and I saw a comment here from Sampler saying the Vision Pro makes you look more derpy though than Quest 3. I mean, I gotta strongly disagree with that. This is the derpiest looking thing I've ever seen. Whereas, here's the Vision Pro. Like, here's the Vision Pro. It looks a lot nicer to me. Maybe this is just a personal aesthetic, but like, I'm happy to wear that on a plane. That doesn't really bother me. But when it comes to like wearing Quest 3, it's a lot more how do I put this, marginal, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the aesthetic doesn't matter. I mean, I've seen people just wear really ugly hats before. So,
Well, it matters for normies to wear something in public. People aren't going to wear something that it's. We say this all the time when we ask why has the Ray-Ban Meta glasses been so successful, right? Ask yourself, why have the Ray-Ban Meta glasses been successful, whereas Google Glass was a complete flop when, from a fundamental perspective, they're somewhat similar products? It's because people want to wear stylish things on their face. They don't want to wear something that makes you look like the Borg, which was Google Glass. They do want to wear something that looks like a normal pair of fashionable high-end sunglasses, which is what the Ray-Ban Meta glasses look like, and why you've sold 2 million units, why they're expanding to try and build 10 million a year within 18 months, I think is the plan there.
I wear mine out constantly, and only a couple times have I had somebody make a comment to me about it. I think that the sheer ignorance of the fact that there are cameras and that I'm just wearing big glasses and that's just a thing. But yeah, I had one lady come up to me at the grocery store the other day and go, "Smile, you're on candid camera." And I was like, "No, you are." Well, they weren't on or anything, but and then an elderly couple at a Costco recently said that they felt very unnerved that I had them on, and of course they had their phones out and were, pointing their camera phones at me, and I'm like, "Ditto," and that was all I could say because, I mean, you're constantly being monitored and pictures taken all the time, so. I don't know. We live in a surveillance state now. That's it.
It's another good example of, again, hardware design choices. The fact that it's very obvious that there are cameras on the Ray-Ban Meta glasses is a design choice. They could have hidden those cameras behind kind of black glass, black plastic, just like it's done on the Vision Pro. Proposal I've given in the past is what you could do is use an electrochromatic plate in front of the glasses, just like you see on X-Rail. If you're not familiar with X-Rail, they're electrochromatic, so you can press a button to adjust the level of dimming. So the lens that you're seeing through can either be maybe 50% transparent, 25%, or 5%. So it's either kind of dim, very dim, or extremely dim. That's how you can choose. So if you had this on sunglasses, you could adjust how dim your sunglasses are. But another thing you could do is put that exact same thing in front of cameras. And what you would do then is have it most of the time be covered. So you don't actually know it's a camera. It just looks like, slightly bulkier Ray-Ban glasses. But then what you would do is when you are using the camera, when it's on, when you have that LED out today, you actually untint it and then you can see through it. So it's a proposal, but again, a design choice. Meta is specifically saying we want it to be crystal clear, because the worst thing in the world is if somebody doesn't know it's a camera. They think that what you just said is great because then they know it's a camera, and it's this philosophy they have of don't surprise people. Never make them go, "Oh my God, there's a camera in there." They want it to be so clear. And I don't think that's going to win out in the long term. I think people are going to want these things to just look like normal glasses. Even if there is a camera, they're going to want it to be hidden. It's crazy that Apple was the one that kind of started this. In a way, I guess you could say that Pico headsets sort of had it with the Pico 4. They hid the color camera sort of behind the backplate, but Apple was the first one to really take this idea into the mainstream. The idea that you can have something that people can see through, but you can't easily see those cameras unless you're looking at the kind of the right angle and bright lighting against it. And what they obviously did there was they have the eyesight display that they kind of show you that you can see the person by showing the eyes. But I wonder who's going to be bold enough to do that without the eyesight display? Who's going to say it's more important that this thing looks sleek than to kind of uphold this esoteric idea of like expectations of privacy, especially when you're already blasting a white light that makes it clear when it actually is recording. Because it doesn't matter when it's not recording. It only matters when it is recording.
Onakazi, you've made a fantastic, it's an Oscar Wilde quote. "Fashion is a form of ugliness so intolerable that we have to alter it every 6 months." I love that quote. I absolutely love that quote. I'm going to have to write that up on my quote board, along with all the crazy stuff that Ian has said to me over the years. This is, the whole idea of the photochromic, is that what you called it? Photochromic? the
Electrochromatic,
glass,
but it's
electrochromatic,
just, yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
It's
yeah, whatever.
I in my Meta Ray Bans, I got the transitions. They get dark in the sunlight, and they'll get dark in any form of what is it, ultraviolet light. And so I wonder why they don't just put a band of LEDs around the inside that you could push a button and it'll immediately get dark. I don't know. It's one of the things that I really have a hard time with
It's
the
an interesting idea.
transitions. Yeah.
Or, I guess, just the electrochromatic idea, right? Where
Yeah.
you're
Right.
literally able to adjust it by changing the voltage.
Exactly.
One thing I would note is that they do have a newer generation of transitions now that they released kind of in the past few months that transition faster, but don't get as dark. So that's the trade-off. They don't get all the way dark, but they transition
Yeah.
a lot faster.
No, I checked those out. No, I want them to get dark because the speed in which they transition isn't as important as how dark they get. To me,
Sure.
personally.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I like the transitions, but I do wish it was a little bit faster, right? You put sunglasses on to avoid your eyes getting blasted by the sun. You put these things on and they're transparent for the first bit. You still kind of, to get it to go dark, you have to look at the sun, but then that's also kind of blinding your eyes out. So the speed would matter for me, but
yeah,
I want to also get all the way dark.
driving in the car is always the part where I'm like, darn, I wish I had an ultraviolet light in the car that would turn these, because I have to keep sticking my head out the window because the windows are slightly filtered so you don't get enough light in. Yeah, it's kind of annoying. But anyway, let's
and I guess I'm seeing George Jorgensen say that as well. The transitions are useless in modern cars because the windows block UV. I guess my car isn't modern enough then, because it definitely works in mine. Maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, mine get sort of tinted, but they don't get fully dark like they should.
Interesting. It must be a newer car thing. My car is quite old, so maybe it just goes straight through, and I'm getting blasted by UV all day anyway. Well, that's fun. Let's talk about Quest V76. Although I will bring up Actual's comment that you buy two glasses, one pair that's sunglasses and one that's transparent. That's certainly a choice.
I'm not made of money. I'm sorry, I can't do that.
I think Ian has 3 or 4 at this point, though. Don't quote me on that.
Oh, I'm paying him too much.
I think it's just his collect. Some people collect stamps. Ian collects Ray-Ban
if I didn't
metaglasses.
need prescription, I could see it. I could see having more than one pair. But 3?
I think one of them you lost, to be fair, so I don't know if we can count that. But yeah, let's talk about Quest V76. There is a very useful feature there. There is also an incredibly controversial feature there. So we'll start with the useful one. That is live captions. So this is something that's been on visionOS since visionOS 2 in September. This is incredibly useful if you have any issues with your hearing. You aren't able to kind of clearly hear voices, or maybe you're completely deaf and you don't have hearing at all. This feature means that while in VR, you will, without the developer having to implement captions, be able to get a floating little window that shows you a text version of what's being said out loud. Here's what it looks like on visionOS. Unfortunately, it doesn't show up in screenshots or videos on Quest. I was there earlier recording a bunch of videos and screenshots. I was in different VR games, getting the characters to speak and having the captions and trying to figure out which one looked best. And I open up all the screenshots and the damn thing isn't there. But it looks pretty similar to this, except it's like a little bit shorter. It's kind of like this. You don't have to use much imagination to realize what it looks like. So this is obviously very, very important accessibility feature. This works in any app that I tried, including VR apps. So you're in a VR game, if it doesn't already have captions. This also is important for developers, because this being a system-wide feature now on Quest and Vision means that you as a developer no longer have to implement this. You no longer need to go and spend time building out this accessibility feature. You can focus on other things because it works remarkably well. So by default, this runs on Meta servers, and so there's a little bit of latency between seeing the captions, but there is an experimental option that lets you download the AI model that does this live transcription to your headset using 150 megabytes. So that's really nothing, to be honest. And this, as Meta says, enhances privacy, improves speed, and makes it available for end-to-end encrypted apps. So I turned this on in this screenshot. This is just before I turned it on, and the captions are really fast, and it's all happening on device. So even if you have no internet connection, it works.
Will it work in here in the studio? So if I turned it on, would I get your?
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
Cool.
you would. The only difference between this and Vision OS is that Vision OS also uses the microphone. So you could use this as like a general tool to get subtitles for real people. Whereas on Quest, it's only game audio. It's not the microphone. So if you say something out loud, if someone else in your physical room says something out loud, on Vision OS, you'll see that in the captions. On Quest, you will not see that. This is only for what the audio that's coming to you from the actual speakers is displaying. So if people speaking in a VR game multiplayer, you will see captions for that, which is remarkable.
Cool. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, Dave and Biggle is pointing out developers should still do it themselves if they want to apply styling to it and blend it into the game world better. 100%. If you're a large studio and you have the time to do that, great. I'm more talking about like an indie developer. If you're barely just trying to get your game out the door and everything feels like you're crunching to hell and you don't have time to do this is obviously really important for you because it means you don't have to spend your time doing this.
So how long until I can change the font?
There are no options. I didn't see any options for that. Let me just quickly check right now.
It's so ridiculous that that's what's going to be requested, is that people are going to be like, oh, I want it to have a different font. This is a brand new feature. So I'm just anticipating the types of things, spacing, font, size. These are all things that are going to have to come.
There is text size, there's color, and there is the background color of the little window. So you do get size, color, and background color for the little pop-up window. Maybe they'll add like things like font or whatever. But I guess, if you do also have vision issues, you could also make the font bigger. You can make it whatever you need it to be. So
lovely.
Very, very important accessibility feature, and Meta should be commended for adding it. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who missed out on things because of this.
Onakazi makes a good point. Yeah, the people who really care about fonts are on the Apple Vision Pro. That's true. That's
the Steve Jobs rounds of kind of
is that corner rounded? Is that corner rounded? What degree is that corner rounded? You're fired. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Jobs was heavily inspired by calligraphy and font when developing the first Macs, and that was obviously brought into iPod and iPhone. And what was his comment that other companies, including Microsoft, just didn't have taste for that kind of thing? Just haven't.
Yeah.
What was he said? Like, they can do whatever they want, but it's very clear that they just have no taste, which is very funny.
It's lovely. Anyway, now, have you gotten the Quest 76 yet?
Yep, I was using this earlier. Yeah. It works. Like I said, it works, and with this feature on, it works even faster and better. That's the good.
LL is asking a question. It does not caption people talking outside of your headset. Only whatever's coming from the speaker. That's it.
Yeah. So Apple Vision Pro does that since Vision OS 2. Quest does not. So this is not for that. You need to go get a Vision Pro if that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the good feature of Horizon OS V76, which is rolling out now, to be clear. It should be coming to your headset anytime in the next few days or weeks. That's the good feature. But there is a bad, depending on what you want out of your headset, feature. And that is that Horizon Worlds can no longer be uninstalled. So Horizon Worlds is now built in. It is just called Worlds. It isn't even called Meta Horizon Worlds anymore. And if you go to click the three little dots on it and go to the menu, there is no uninstall anymore. It's not there. And so Meta has kind of been integrating Horizon Worlds more deeply into the Quest system experience for years now. Obviously, they added a whole tab to the library for Worlds. The feed heavily recommends Worlds. The chat systems have been unified. The smartphone companion app recommends Worlds. And so some people were frustrated about this. And one thing that really frustrated them is that sometimes you'll get a notification that you think, oh, there's something relevant for me. Maybe one of my controller batteries is low, or an app's just finished updating, or somebody's requested me to join a party, or a call, whatever. And sometimes it'll just be, this is a world we think you like. And sometimes it's utter slop, right? It's like, here's this complete slop made by a 5-year-old. You should go and try this out. And so what people got rid of this was deleting Horizon Worlds, uninstalling it from their headset. And so it seems now that, at least from the system software, that's no longer going to be an option. And it may be possible still to use ADB on Uninstall and things like that. And I see a really good question here from It's Pre VR Real Estate. What if I already uninstalled it? Is it back? I don't know. On the headsets that I have it installed for obvious reasons. We report on these, we go into Worlds, we try them out all the time. But please let us know in the audience if you're listening to this after the fact. If you have updated to V76 and you did have it uninstalled before, did it come back? Let us know. And remember that you're looking for Worlds now. It's been renamed to Worlds in the library.
And people have been making the comments in the chat, and I'm not going to call on anybody specifically because I think it's Horizon Worlds is going to be the operating system. I mean, it is going to be the operating system. And somebody else made the comment that, it's Microsoft and Internet Explorer all over again. I don't think that there's going to be any type of antitrust nonsense. But yeah, Meta is definitely making Horizon Worlds, Horizon OS, the lines are being blurred, and it's not just from a bad refresh rate. It actually is being blurred. This is going to be the OS going forward. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think if you look at that future of Horizon OS tease that they showed back at Connect, where they have like a revamped UI, it's all centered around Worlds. The one thing that they haven't done yet, which seems kind of so obvious, is get rid of Horizon Home and just use Horizon Worlds for that. So right now you have your virtual home in Quest. It was called Quest Home originally. It was renamed to Horizon Home, but that's not Horizon Worlds. So you do have a Horizon Home, your Quest system home, and then you also have a Horizon Worlds home. And that duplication seems a little, if they're going to go this hard, and I'm not saying they should do this, I'm just saying if they're going to do all this anyway, and their whole strategy is to make Horizon Worlds like the fabric of the Quest experience, it would make a lot of sense to make the Quest home space your Horizon home, right? Why not? If you're going to do this anyway, if we can't even uninstall it anymore, if everything is all about Worlds, why does Horizon Worlds not just the default VR experience? Why do you not just boot into Horizon Worlds? Maybe they will. Robert Quinones brings up a great point about this, that does Horizon Worlds have an offline version? So maybe, no, I don't think it does. I think this is entirely online. So it probably would be a situation where this then wouldn't work online. But I think most people use their Quest 3 and 3S at least, maybe not the older headsets, but they use pass-through as their home anyway, right? And it is the default home pass-through. So maybe you can't go into VR in the home space when you're not connected to the internet. I want to repeat again that I'm not saying this is what I want to happen. I'm saying that if you look at what Meta's strategy is and you look at what they're doing anyway with this, it seems like a weird thing to have the Quest Home, because it's not like the Quest Home has all this great stuff going for it anyway, right? It's not like the old Oculus Home where you could customize it. You can customize the skybox, right? But otherwise, they're really bad quality anyway. I've ranted about this over and over again. They're low quality, they're low resolution, they're not really interactive. You can kind of teleport about and there's like an avatar mirror, but that's it. And then, other than that, what's really the point of it?
Well, okay. The point is that for the longest time, everybody, I'll say experts, have been saying that all we're doing is jamming 2D UI into a 3D environment. And the idea that when you function in the world, you do not function with 2D interactions, you function with 3D interactions. So having this be the UI, an actual virtual physical space, gives you the ability to have UI that is more intuitive to the human condition, as opposed to just pushing buttons on a screen that just floats out into the cosmos in front of you. So I think this is a short-term step to a long-term solution. And someday we'll laugh at the idea of all these little 2D panels as our UI, but we're just not there yet. And the transition, it's hard. It's a difficult process to go from one to the other, especially when our brains are already thinking about it in terms of 2D experiences. Getting everybody to grok, I don't like that word, to understand the 3D interaction experience is it's going to be tough, but it'll it'll happen eventually.
Yeah, that certainly opens up a can of worms. That's a very deep conversation, but I guess we can
Yeah.
touch on it. So I do think it's very promising in principle to think that we could go to these kind of exotic Minority Report style 3D interfaces. But in reality, in the physical world, even we still do choose 2D interfaces. When you want to have a sign on a wall, you don't come up with some sort of sculpture to display the thing. When you give someone a piece of information on a piece of paper, you don't make it into a paper mache swan and kind of put the information all over the swan, right? This is all to say 2D interfaces are fast, easy to understand, can represent detailed information very quickly. And I've tried a bunch of 3D interfaces. The Rift had one where when you wanted to launch an app, you could take out a cartridge and put it into a game console and press play. And it's so cool the first time. And it's kind of fun the next 10 times. But on the 150th time, it's sluggish and it's boring. And let's be real, what do people really want to do with these interfaces? They want to launch the experience. They want to open the app. They want to get the information. They want to bring up the movie. These are just tools to get to what you really want. And I guess Meta's argument is that they want Horizon Worlds to be the thing you really want, and then that they want to bring you into that as much as possible. And yeah, it's possible that some of this interface goes away because you do go into Horizon Worlds and use portals to go to different areas, and that's kind of where Meta wants to push you. But I still think if you aren't interested in that, if you do just want to launch an app, get into whatever game you're playing, just launch the movie you want to watch, 2D interfaces are going to be around for a very long time for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. And I know that is the strong and pretty logical argument. But I still feel like it's going to change. I mean, a sign on a wall, you don't interact with it. So it can be 2D. A menu is 2D. Even your phone screen is 2D. I guess it's the things we don't think about, like going from one room to another or going from one location to another. I picking up and manipulating something. I don't know. It's hard to quantify how many things need to occur in order for an interaction, a UI, to be considered a 3D experience. So yeah, I don't know. I guess this is why it's taken so long to get to this point, is because nobody really comprehends what a good 3D UI should look like, because we don't have a real one.
Sure, but I'm just arguing it's possible that there's no such thing. It's possible that when it comes to, buttons and interfaces, when it comes to like bringing up a piece of information that is inherently flat, that a piece of text, right? Text is inherently flat, or a 2D image, even a 3D image that's displayed in a rectangular view. That all of these things just do suit these interfaces. I mean, what you do get with VR and AR, XR in general, is that you're no longer confined to one screen. So you can bring out, the menu can be something that floats below the content, and then instead of having to have this all in one kind of scrollable rectangle, you can detach these things, and the videos are up here and the player is down here, and that's been very successful. I think even that in itself is a huge step forward from our traditional systems, right? If I bring up, I just have a random image in front of me here, like just on, this is the most mundane, terrible example, but just the fact here that the panel, the menu bar is a separate thing from the display part itself, that's significant. And again, this is a really bad example. You need to come up, I don't have a better one in front of me right now, but even that is significant and allows for interfaces that are dramatically different than what we have on traditional flat screen devices today.
McDonald's. I'm going to go to McDonald's after this.
Perfect example of the kind of swap.
Well, all right. I mean, and we'll figure out UI eventually, or Meta will, or somebody will. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a comment here from like George Jorgensen saying, hang on, I'll bring up another picture I have here when it comes to UI. Like this is an example here, right, where you can kind of have these pop-up interfaces that are separate to the main window. You can have, multiple windows at once. This kind of thing is a lot more promising to me than the idea of like coming up with some exotic three-dimensional version. Bring up another example here, right? Here's another example where the menu bar is up here, but then the content can be here, and there's no rectangle that these things are confined to. You can do this in whatever kind of way is wanted. But yeah, we'll have to keep track on this. I think some of the commenters are saying, I would not expect to see Meta disentangle from Horizon Worlds anytime soon. If you are buying a Quest headset, you need to be aware, is what the message of this change really is, that Meta sees Horizon Worlds as the core, the fabric, the fundamental first party critical software for this device. And if you want to escape it, it's going to get harder and harder. I'm sure you'll be ways to hack around this, ADB commands and things like that. But if you don't want to constantly be playing a game of cat and mouse with Meta, if you don't want to see Horizon Worlds, Quest headsets are probably not the best option for you. It, maybe you can ignore it, right? Maybe you just don't care. Maybe even if you are a year from now brought into Horizon Worlds as soon as you put the headset on and as soon as you toggle pass through, as long as you can press virtual desktop or Steam Link in the corner of VR Chat or Population One or Pavlov or whatever game you play, maybe you don't care. But if that does bother you, like the fact that Meta is going to be pushing this at you, it doesn't seem like it's a good idea to invest in a Quest headset for the future, is what we can see the clear trend here over years. As you've been saying, Kyle, at the start of this, these things are merging together. This is a merge. This is the rename of the operating system from Quest OS to Horizon OS was not just a word. It was very much so connected to the Horizon World strategy.
Yep. The writing is on the virtual wall. Horizon Worlds is here to stay.
Yep. Let's talk about Apple now for a little bit. We have an Apple section. So the first piece of Apple news here is that Apple Immersive Video is now supported by DaVinci Resolve 20 Beta. So this is a piece of video editing software that is used for a bunch of Hollywood movies, as you can see on screen right now, used by a lot of professional productions of all sizes. This is really serious software, and it is now the first to have end-to-end support for Apple Immersive Video. If you don't know what Apple Immersive Video is, it is a proprietary Apple format for 180-degree 3D video with 8K per eye resolution, high dynamic range, 90 frames per second, and spatial audio. And as we've been saying over and over on this show and in our Vision Pro review, it takes the idea of 180-degree VR and brings the quality up to a point where it's actually really, really appealing and where you're not distracted by the low resolution or the compression blockiness or any of the other kind of issues that made 180-degree video suck for most people for most of consumer VR's modern history. And so right now in Vision Pro, it is kind of a shining example of what you can do with that headset. The content there looks great on those micro OLED displays. The problem is, of course, that there's very little of it. There are some great things there that we talked about recently, like the Metallica concert, like Submerge, the short film, The Weeknd's immersive music video. There's a bunch of nature documentaries. There are kind of little 5-minute highlight things for sports like soccer and baseball and American football. But there's not the real sort of depth of content that you would want from a platform like YouTube or Netflix or something like that. You're still going to be left wanting more after every video. And so the issue today, the fundamental issue behind that is that this content is all made by Apple, but that's not sustainable, right? Like originally, back when televisions launched, there were some television companies that invested heavily in making the content. That actually did happen. But over time, you needed television networks to come out. You needed eventually, VHS, and then the ability to have tape recorders and video editing tools for VHS that allowed productions of all kinds. This is what's just about to happen to Apple Immersive Video. So DaVinci Resolve 20 will be able to have full support for editing, grading, mixing, and outputting this format. And this will pair perfectly with Blackmagic's other Apple Immersive product coming soon. So this is their editing software. Their other product that we never shut up about on this show because it's going to be so significant is the camera, their Apple Immersive Video camera. And this thing is coming out very shortly. They opened pre-orders for it in December for $30,000, which for you and me is a lot of money. Maybe there's some people in this audience who it isn't a lot of money for, but for me and Kyle, it definitely would be a lot of money. But for a professional studio that is building content like this, that is recording, documentaries, short films, things like that, this is actually a very reasonable price. This is the kind of price that they are used to paying for cameras. And when you combine this camera and DaVinci Resolve 20, you get the ability for third-party studios to build high-quality Apple immersive video for Vision Pro. And it's at this point that we expect to see this format explode in terms of the width and breadth of content that's available. And some of that will be on Apple TV, Apple's own service, and there will be entire other services that spring up for this because, again, it is so compelling that once you try this on a Vision Pro, it's obvious instantly that this is the future of a lot of things. It's the future of a midpoint between watching sports on your TV and being there in the stadium. You always want to be in there in the stadium, ideally, but today you're not. Why not? Call not the same for whatever your sport is than being right there in the stadium. This will offer a mid-ground when they're able to live stream these events. Theater as well. There are a lot of theater productions that the kind of social richness of feeling that those people are right in front of you adds to it. And then if you were to watch that at home, it wouldn't quite work. I think theater productions would be a great example of something that would, work well in Apple Immersive Video, as well as, of course, the documentaries that we're already seeing. So I'm really, really excited to see what creators come up with once we have this camera and the editing software out there.
The thing that I'm the most excited about is that Apple is using their own codec, their own compression, that they have kind of, jazzed it all up and made it nice and neat. My biggest concern and challenge with current 3D movies and the way that, side by side or top bottom, however you consume them, is that the compression that's used to make these isn't taking into account the fact that the artifacts on the left eye and the right eye do not match up. And so when you watch them and it converges, the artifacts don't line up. They're not the same for both eyes. So I'm hoping that Apple's Voodoo, whatever, stuff they're using here in their proprietary codec, I hope that it takes in that into account, that adds to the value. And then we'll see other codecs also take this into consideration. I'm really surprised that somebody like John Carmack hasn't, first of all, acknowledged that this is a problem and then resolved it, because that's what we do, right? We assume that John Carmack is going to resolve these problems. But now he's not even with Meta anymore, but he still has opinions. He's a lot of fun to listen to. But I do think that this is a smart problem. This is a dumb problem that a smart person can solve. And obviously Apple has gotten some voodoo into theirs to make it look so good.
Yeah, so there's two things here. The first, you started by talking generally about 3D video. And I see some of our comments here talking about spatial video and recording spatial video with a headset, and someone's even bringing up like their X-Reel Beam Pro, this kind of smartphone-like thing. I want to be crystal clear here that we're not talking about rectangular 3D video here. This is 3D 180-degree video that immerses the full front half of your field of view. As you turn your head, it's in the full front section of your view range, I guess. So these Apple Immersive Video we're talking about are not rectangular. The second thing, when it comes to like compression and the differences, that is a huge issue when you had this side-by-side 3D video, because how 3D video worked before this current era of Apple Spatial Video and Apple Immersive Video is that it was indeed literally side-by-side. So it was like a video file that if you were to view it raw on a non-3D device or just like a regular video player, you would literally just see two views. Half of the view would be one eye and half the other eye, divided down the middle. How this works is it uses multi-view HEVC. So firstly, it's not the old H.264 codec. It is the new HEVC codec. And multi-view means that it actually uses a different layer for each eye. So based on the fact that the encoding here should be fairly deterministic, you won't really get a mismatch there. And it also has the advantage that if you play this on a 2D device, it just plays as a 2D video, right? It's a 2D video. There's no magic. They don't need to divide it down. It's also just more efficient to do it this way. The other thing is that this is recorded at a very high bit rate. That means you don't really get many compression artifacts in the first place. theoretically you could choose to do it at a lower bit rate, right? That is something that people could do. But on Apple TV, at least, they serve this at a very high bit rate. The Vision Pro headset is capable of decoding it at a very high bit rate. And you just don't see those visual issues anymore. You don't go into the Metallica concert or the Weekend's immersive video. I'm never there going like, oh, I can see the issue here. That's what really strikes me about this. I can watch this content and go, this is like, they've done it. They've got past the quality threshold where I'm no longer completely distracted by all the technical issues. I'm actually able to just enjoy the content. And that's why I can't wait to see more of it.
I am going to tell you, David, that you are incorrect on something technical. And so everybody write this down because I'm going to do this. These are still taking square videos, even if they are getting 180 degrees because of the size of the lens. The sensor in this thing is still rectangular, and it's still
Correct,
a rectangular image. And
yes, but it's not being put. I'm not saying that I'm not saying there's a difference in the aspect ratio. It's just that instead of literally just kind of crudely being put into one rectangular video file, these are separate layers on a video file.
Yeah, and that's fine, whether they're on top of each other in their storage because of the codec or whether they're side by side if you view it. It's still a different frame for each eyeball.
Yes,
and
correct.
No matter what the bit rate is, no matter what you're still going to have some form of processing. It's a digital image, and the left eye and the right eye are not going to be digitally. Now, you're right. It might be so minimal of a difference at this high frame rate and resolution that you don't see those artifacts, but that doesn't mean they're still there. It just means you're not seeing them.
Yeah, but you could say
this
the
is
same
still
thing.
a problem with 3D video in general that Apple just resolved for their own format.
It's not a problem because it's not a problem if you don't see it, right? Like you could say the exact same thing about virtual desktops, Steam
you
Link,
can say that about anything.
But if it's so, like, if you can't see it anymore, it's not a problem, right? Like if you had a display that was so high resolution in theory, like say it was 32K or whatever, where you didn't see one dead pixel, does one dead pixel matter? If you physically looked at it and you couldn't tell the difference, it's like that Westworld quote, right? Are you real? If you can't tell, does it matter? If you can't tell the difference, does it matter?
So I guess it's all a matter of my perspective. I'm looking for it and I'm seeing it. It's when I don't see it that it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah.
Fine. But now, as it stands, now I don't have a Vision Pro and I have not tried any of this glorious 3D content. So I might be spinning my wheels here. Yeah, you're right. I should.
Go there and walk in and try it. Anyone here who hasn't tried it, go and try it. They really have got it past the quality. So George Jorgensen's pointing out an important technical caveat. MVHEC itself is not an Apple invention. That is absolutely correct. Apple did not invent MVHEVC. What they did is standardize a profile for it. They have the Apple spatial video format of MVHEVC that is used here. And so the other thing is just that they've, gone out and actually supported it in the iPhone, right? You can take regular 3D spatial videos in the iPhone. They've gone and created a whole pipeline with Blackmagic, with this camera, with DaVinci Resolve. And yeah, none of this is like Apple has invented anything out of scratch, but what they've done is they've actually put the technical, what's the word I'm looking for here? They have delivered it in a sense where it's no longer half-assed, where the technical aspects are no longer a limitation. And again, I was such a skeptic of 180-degree video. I used to say that it was trash and it was nowhere near worth it. Just do real VR. It was always just blocky and pixely and terrible. And I agree with you. You would even see like one eye's compression would be different than the other because for some reason these companies were delivering this at a low bit rate, which just is crazy when you think about it. And because it's magnified over your entire field of view, you can see all of these imperfections. But what I'm saying is here, from my own eyes, from having the Vision Pro, from watching these things, it's solved. They have actually pushed past the quality threshold where I am able to just enjoy the story in front of me, enjoy the documentary, enjoy the music, whatever it happens to be. I'm no longer limited by the technology. And that's really, really remarkable. The only limitation left is that it's not 6 DoF, right? It is still 3 DoF. So if I move my head forward or to the side, it's very clear that it's not a real image. That's the one, like the visuals are solved. It's the kind of spatial aspect of it that isn't solved yet, and we could talk all day about the potential solutions to that, but they're manifold, right?
Yeah. No, so I guess what I'm doing is I am complaining then about a problem that has been solved. I just haven't experienced it yet. Well,
Yeah.
that's fun.
I mean, I wonder. So I wonder if Meta are going to have looked at Apple Immersive Video and realized that they need to deliver better here. We do know that they perhaps are having like a partnership with James Cameron that might just be about regular 3D, but it also might be immersive. Meta does have these programs on MetaQuest TV, the MetaQuest TV app, that are like immersive video. They had like this series, The Faceless Lady, I think it was called, and something like that. And I tried them, and it's just like the bitrate is still just low. Like, why are like you're Meta? You have a giant global CDN infrastructure for serving video. Just double the bitrate, please. If you're listening to this and you're Meta and you're anything to do with this, just double the damn bitrate and also increase the resolution. But maybe some of this comes down to like just the fact that creators don't have these tools. I wonder, can people use this camera and DaVinci Resolve to export into regular VR 180 that can be viewed by anyone, whether they have an Apple headset or not? I don't know. We haven't tried that. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess everybody else needs to catch up to Apple then. How many times has that sentence been said over the years?
Yeah. And the frustrating part is, of course, that, I'm saying, oh, Vision Pro, and it's a $3,500 headset. And I understand that. I really do. When people say, like, why are you even talking about this? It's 3,500. I don't understand when people make the claim, oh, Apple's killed it or it's flopped, because Apple's killed it thing is completely fake news. The flop thing is just like not understanding that, of course, a $3,500 product isn't going to be as mainstream as a $500 product. But I do understand when you say that this is completely out of a regular person's price range. And that's why we are so focused on following up the story of what is Apple's progress on releasing cheaper headsets, because these aren't going to be $3,500 forever. We do know that the display companies are trying to figure out, how do we make these micro OLED panels cheaper, and how do we get regular OLED panels that are almost as dense as micro OLED, so that we can just leverage the fact that regular OLED is already a lot cheaper than micro OLED. Can we get something? That's basically what Apple is trying to do to get a cheaper headset out. Regular OLED that is so dense that it's close to micro OLED. They want to. If Apple could, they would be selling you a cheaper headset. It's just they have a quality standard when it comes to resolution, when it comes to it needs to be OLED, that they are not willing to put out an LCD headset. It's just not. And a lot of this content wouldn't look good. The Metallica concert relies on the darkness of OLED. People are saying, I want this on my Quest. You wouldn't, because it would lose a lot of the quality. Submerge does too. You're in this dark submarine. I'm not going to spoil the story, but you're in this dark submarine, and it needs to be OLED. It just wouldn't work. It would be a washed out mess on LCD. So ironically does the Weeknd's music videos. So many segments of it are, rely on the incredible contrast and color depth of OLED. And unfortunately, if you're on an LCD display, there are certain things that just aren't going to come across artistically. And but the issue is that if you want an affordable headset, it's going to be LCD. You're muted, Kyle.
Sorry. Jack B here in the comments says, we're still messing with MP3s that are capped at stereo audio instead of AAC or AC3, even though 6-channel headsets and car audio grows on trees. There's barely any media to feed them. Now, that's an interesting point to make, because we could have all the best tech in the world, and if there's no content to run on it, then the value is not there. So we do need to have a bounty of new content to come out to prove this tech, and then maybe Meta will see the writing on the wall again. Maybe I should write it down on the walls in Horizon World so they see it.
Yeah, so Onakazi says, I saw a rumor or two that Apple Vision Pro 2 has entered production. Not sure of the reliability. And LL said, Onakazi, I did expect that to be talked today. Is it on the list of topics? Yes, it is. In fact, it's our topic right now. So that's what we're going to talk about. Perfect timing. So there is a rumor indeed from a Chinese source, a Chinese news outlet that quotes an anonymous source, saying that the panels, shells, and other key components of Apple Vision Pro 2 have entered mass production. And this even lists specific names of the suppliers for the glass and the shell. So the glass on the front and kind of the general shell. So we must repeat over and over that this is just one source. This is just a news outlet in China. This should not be treated as gospel, but the specificity of the suppliers that they have mentioned and the timeline here suggests that it may potentially be true. Potentially. So what we have heard from other sources, from prominent supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, is that Apple is working on a refreshed Vision Pro that upgrades the M2 chip to the M5 chip. And that would be a remarkable performance improvement, a truly remarkable performance. You would be talking like probably like twice the CPU performance and maybe like 5 times the GPU performance, which would just be, crazy. And then on the NPU, the neural processing unit, that would be even greater. You'd be talking about probably like 10x or more improvement. And so a lot of people say, well, Vision Pro's limit isn't its chip. There's all these other things that need to be fixed. But when you consider the complexity of making a whole new product versus just upgrading the chip, one is a lot cheaper for Apple. And so I don't expect that if this is the case, that we're just going to see a Vision Pro 2 in the next 6 months or so, or maybe 9 months, that is just a chip upgrade. It's not going to dramatically change the situation, but it may allow Apple to introduce new capabilities that aren't present on Vision Pro 1. They also could, for example, dramatically improve computer vision tasks. So the hand occlusion could get better in darkness, for example. All the tracking could get better because they're running, heavier, more detailed computer vision models. The spatial personas could get higher quality, which is very, very important. Those spatial personas are the best telepresence technology that exists today. And perhaps it could run some of the iPad games that currently aren't there. That would include, things like the Assassin's Creed game that are available on iPad and Resident Evil. VR games could come along that are, higher fidelity. Maybe you could imagine something on the scale of No Man's Sky maybe arriving at minimum as a floating iPad app, at maximum maybe as a VR version. There's a lot you could do there. That would be like by far the most powerful standalone headset in the world. Like Vision Pro is already today, but it's not on a CPU level. It's a huge margin, but the GPU in Vision Pro actually is not that much more powerful than Quest 3s. Like people have this idea that it's in a different realm. It's not. It's in the same realm. M5s though, it could be. It could be, several times more powerful than what you see in Quest 3. And that would be pretty remarkable.
As a person who does not own an Apple Vision Pro because of the cost, I would look forward to seeing, we know that these parts are being made, but we don't know, we don't even know that the parts are being made. We're hearing rumors. So all we're doing is we're speculating about speculation. But if these pieces are built as a sort of universal size and they just changed out the internal components, David, could you see them doing a Vision Air or a Vision, Light or whatever the hell they want to call it, and then also a Vision Pro 2 using the same components but internally different? I mean, if you look at all the different MacBooks, they all look exactly the same until you look at the model number or test it out to see what the inside looks like.
Yes, so today they do, but in the past they didn't. And I think to deliver a Vision Air or a Vision, just Apple Vision, you need to get displays that are a lot cheaper. You need to either have a company that's figured out how to mass produce micro OLED at high yield and low cost, which nobody has done yet, right? The BOE panels are roughly the same price as the Sony panels that are used in Vision Pro 1. I don't think they're ready yet to do a cheaper headset. They want to, of course, they want to, but they're not ready yet. It's still going to take a few years to get the cheap displays that have the same quality, or close to the same quality at least, as what you see in Vision Pro 1 and past that quality bar that we keep talking about Apple having. So until then, they just need to keep this thing relevant, because it's going to seem very silly if a few months from now we have M5 MacBooks coming out there and this $3,500 Vision Pro is still on the M2. And it also means that you're just unnecessarily constraining developers. So just because it's not that crazy to just upgrade the chip in a product, right? Apple does it all the time when it's their own silicon. It seems something more viable. I do wonder though, will we see other changes? Um, one of the big problems of Vision Pro 1 is that its vertical field of view is quite constrained, and that's because these first generation Sony near 4K micro OLEDs in it are kind of horizontal aspect ratio. They're kind of like landscape aspect ratio is what I'm trying to say. So the newer Sony micro OLEDs that are going into the Sony and Samsung headsets don't have that problem. They're more square aspect ratio, and so you could actually improve the vertical field of view, which would be fixing one of the kind of big issues of Vision Pro. So I wonder if they could do that. I wonder if we'll see those next generation Sony micro OLEDs or even the BOE panels go into Vision Pro 2. And I wonder also if maybe because of the time, because of some improvements in the supply chain, maybe you could see the price come down by maybe $500. I do think there's a possibility that we see this thing arrive at $3,000. However, that would be contingent on the current tariff situation not being an issue.
Oh, let's not get into
we have
all
to.
that.
I mean, we have to.
But it could change tomorrow, though. That's the thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that it could. But so right now, we talked about like last week. Will this affect Quest headsets? Meta has moved much of their Quest headset production to Vietnam, and what President Trump has done in over the past 36, 24 hours, I think, is get rid of the majority of the tariffs, other than a base 10% tariff, except for China, which now they're engaged in a kind of trade war where it's above 100% tariffs on China. And a lot of Vision Pro production is currently in China. So they would have to move their supply chain out of China or hope that by then this isn't an issue to really get a cost reduction, I think. But, it's possible we do see Vision Pro 2 produced in Vietnam, slightly different suppliers, slightly more efficiency, maybe a change in display that brings down the price. But fundamentally, I wouldn't expect this to be much different. I think it's probably the same product, just with a faster chip. And then maybe, although I think it might just be me being hopeful, we see the display taller.
I hope you are right. And I'm hoping that the tariffs don't matter. I haven't bought any chickens yet. So, and I am out in rural Ohio, and a lot of my neighbors have them. So I don't know. Can I get a goose that lays the golden egg, and then when I crack it open, it's got an Apple Vision Pro in it? That'd be nice. All right, David, I have in my possession a Pico 4 that I use every once in a while when I remember to charge it. But when I go into VR chat and dance, people can't see me dance. If only there was something that we could talk about.
Sure. So that is our next topic. Just a couple of little comments I want to bring up just before we move on. But that was
I jumped the gun. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So there's a few comments here. Subcog saying, I think it's a strategic mistake to push for 4K screens in unmanufacturable fantasy headsets today. By the time Apple can source cheap 4K screens, Meta and everyone else will have access to. In some ways, that's a good point, right? In some ways, it's true to say that what Apple did with Vision Pro, and I'm not the only one to say this, a lot of people have said this, is they essentially yanked a product out of the future that shouldn't exist today, and they brought it into the world of today. They brought it into the world of 2024. It's over a year old now, and nothing like it existed at the time. And even now, we're only seeing some headsets that are somewhat like it, right? Play for Dream, for example, Samsung and Sony headsets. They're still not really quite like it. They don't have the computing part to really back up what's going on there, and the pastor isn't even in the same realm. But yes, I think again, in many ways for Apple, this is a developer kit. It's about building up the Vision OS platform. The product that matters is Vision OS, because when those cheap headsets do come out, these cheap panels do come out, I should say, or more affordable panels at this kind of density, you can't start Vision OS from scratch then. You can't start everything at the start and hope that you can somehow catch up to Meta, even though Meta will have all those 4K screens by then. That's why you need to start now, and why they have started now. And that's kind of their strategy there, I think. You're muted, Kyle. I think were you going to bring up the...
Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, honestly. I mean, you know, the idea that the panels need to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and we want the headsets to be smaller and smaller and smaller, and the technology keeps advancing, and micro LEDs and micro this and micro that, and at what point, because I don't remember Michael Abrash ever saying anything about the size of the screen. He talked about resolution in the ultimate headset back in the day, a long time ago. But what is the ultimate size? Like, is it more about ratio to lens, or is it more about, like, I don't know. I'm not one of those people that thinks that I need to have a 220-degree field of view in every direction in order for it to be a good experience. I mean, but I'm a bespectacled individual, so I've always had kind of a reduced FOV because of my thick glasses. So what is the perfect size?
There's so many issues there. And before we get into this, I want to say thank you to Parmesan for the $10, which is what I thought you were going to say in the first place, by the way. But that's a very difficult issue. There is this opposing constraint that we want these headsets that are sleeker and lighter so they don't hurt our face. And we also want these wider field of view systems. And kind of when we went from Fresnel lenses to pancake lenses, we find that you can get, a smaller screen and the same field of view or even wider field of view. And it gets more and more difficult to expand a wider field of view from a smaller display without introducing, distortions and other issues that are kind of impossible to correct for at some point. But I think eventually, when it comes to resolution, right, you're going to want that to increase for a very, very long time. And you can either do that through just a larger panel or just higher pixel density. With micro OLED, we're on a path to get the pixel density that will get us all the way up to retinal resolution, right? You can go, like today, they're 4K. They can go denser than that. It's possible to happen, but the cost is then going to be a constraint there. It's a tough one because, again, field of view does matter to me, at least. And I think it does matter to you more than you let on, especially to your subconscious. Because when you're in a car, right, even if you can't see, sharply to your side, you can still see the people rushing past you, right? When you are walking along, you can still see your torso and your feet and your legs, and that's an important part of feeling grounded. If you look up in the air, maybe you walk into something, right? When you there's a lot of different examples. Just
Sure.
in
No, I
general,
get it.
yeah, when you walk inside, the fact that you can see your peripheral vision, it matters. But how do you do that while also getting slimmer and lighter? It's a really tough challenge. It is the challenge of the industry. But I think one thing that will happen here is that we will see different headsets emerge for different use cases. So you will see these headsets that have an open periphery. They don't even have blockers on the side, just like the Quest Pro, just like the Samsung headset, and they will get slimmer and lighter, and they will kind of be designed to be almost like they're almost trying to mimicking AR glasses. They're designed purely for mixed reality, where you're using color pass through to see the world. And unlike the transparent AR systems, they'll have 90, 100-degree field of views that give you no issues with opacity, high quality control of pixels that can do full mixed reality. And then you'll also see these headsets are designed for like immersion, right? For military flight simulators, for home flight simulators and racing simulators, for gaming enthusiasts. And they will perhaps not be as focused on getting so slim and light that they're almost like glasses. They will be focused on widening out the field of view, increasing the computing power, things like that, getting brighter HDR, all of that. And so I don't think there's going to be this magic headset that is magically doing both. It is going to be this thing where these headsets become more and more specialized. And today we do have this kind of jack of all trades approach of the Quest, but that's not going to be the case forever, because eventually, you have to make a constraint. You have to choose which constraint you're attacking. You have to choose what do you want to trade off. What are you optimizing for? A bicycle is really lightweight and lets you weave between traffic, and you can put it on a bus, and you can put it, in a house and not have to have a garage or a parking space. But a car lets you, drive a lot further and bring a lot more cargo. These are both things that take you from A to B, but in very different ways. And in the same way, there's going to be like different constraints that go on here.
It's a good point.
So yeah, people are talking about the tariffs here. And yeah, it's true to say that even the reciprocal tariffs, other than China, have been paused for 90 days. But we're talking about Vision Pro 2 that's probably coming out in 6 or 9 months. So what matters is like, what is going to be the permanent state here? I think what's very true to say, as you said, Kyle, though, is that this is just unpredictable. But it does need to be taken into account by these companies. They need to try to predict it. Because if you want to launch a product, you need to put a price tag on it in the US. And so, it is one of those situations where I'm just pointing out that even if everything goes right, there are political reasons now that mean that headsets may not, for at least the next few years, actually be able to get cheaper in the way we wanted them to.
What I wonder
In the
what
US.
the savings would be to fly over to the UK to buy some of these things and then fly back to avoid the tariff price raising. But see, now I'm talking about the tariffs. I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, let's move on to what you said before, because you do have a Pico 4.
I do.
It's actually a great headset. I feel sorry for the fact that it's not actually properly sold in North America. It should be there because Pico 4 Ultra, the latest version, is the only direct competitor to Quest 3. There's no other headset in the market that you would really say is a direct competitor, right? PlayStation VR2, it's wired. It either goes on a PS5 or a PC. It's not standalone. It doesn't have mixed reality. Apple Vision Pro, it's 7 times the price. Play for Dream, it's 4 times the price. There's nothing that's a real direct competitor to Quest 3 except for Pico 4 Ultra. And that's why I think it's a shame that it's not sold in the United States or Canada. And the other reason is that it means that some of its unique features don't put pressure on Meta to deliver the same. And one of those that people really love is the Pico motion trackers. And so these things have been available since around September, and they're compatible with Pico 4 Ultra, Pico 4, and the older Pico Neo 3. And until now, they've come as a pair with these little short straps that go around your ankles, and that gives you leg tracking. And so how these work on a technical level is that they have 12 IR LEDs on them. So they're kind of just like mini controllers without the buttons and sticks and triggers. And then they also have IMUs in them. So to calibrate them, you just look down at your legs, they see the position, boom, calibrated. No complicated calibration step. From then on, whenever they're in view of a headset camera, it's real true optical tracking of your legs. Just like if you had a controller strapped to one of your legs, it's real true tracking. When it's not within view of a camera, it uses the last position of that it was known from the camera, combined with the accelerometer and gyroscope data, right, in the IMU, and it fuses that with a skeletal model of your body based on the last known position and comes up with a plausible position of your legs. It actually works really, really well. But of course, until now, it's just been your ankles, your hands, your controllers, your hand tracking, and your head. If you want full body tracking, you need more points of tracking than that. And that's what they are delivering now. So they have just launched the Pico Motion Tracker Waist version, which comes as a single tracker with a much longer strap that goes around, guess what, your waist. So now when you have the ankle trackers and the waist tracker, you get full body tracking on standalone without having to have base stations or without having to have, expensive Vive trackers. So the price here is very reasonable. So for these two ankle trackers, as a pair, it's 90 euros. For the waist tracker, it's 50 euros. And that means if you buy both to get full body tracking, it is 140 euros. That's like the price of one Vive tracker. And this is giving you this entire thing. And these things, again, they just work so well. They're so light. They're 27 grams. I've said this before on this show, but when I first tried these, I almost walked out of the building with them still on my ankles. And they had to say, please don't steal our trackers. And I said, oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't even realize they're there. They're so light on my ankles. And then the same thing will be on your waist, right? This won't be any issue. They have a really long battery life. They charge via USB-C. And if you like to tweak around, or you're a developer that likes to play around with these things on a technical level, you can even pop them out and use them as tracked objects. You can even pass through data to their USB-C ports. You can make your own tracked controller, like a rifle or something, and then pass through like the trigger data and button data into this that gets then wirelessly transmitted to the headset. This will be the brain of your custom controller, essentially. So there's so much to love about this. It works. They work on standalone games like VR Chat, Blade and Sorcery Nomad, Drunken Bar Fight, and they work on PC VR via either Pico Connect or now, as of the latest update, Virtual Desktop. Guy Godin, who I'm not sure if he's in our comments today, he usually is, but maybe he's not today. He has implemented this in Virtual Desktop, which is available on Pico. So if you're a VR Chat PC user, you can literally get a Pico 4, which these days you can get it for like, €200 or less. And if you used like 100, €150, get these things, as a triple for €140, and boom, you are in VR chat with body tracking. And of course, if you want the higher quality Pico 4 Ultra, that's more expensive. It's €600 or something like that, and then plus this, but it's still very reasonable. And Meta has kind of said that they don't want to build this. Meta CTO has said that unless these Pico trackers become like the most popular thing ever and grow VR more than Meta, essentially, this was his words, the juice is not worth the squeeze, according to Meta. So this is something that is unique to Pico. As I said before, it can't even put pressure on Meta because they don't sell in Meta's home market. But it's really frustrating because I see Quest enthusiasts all the time saying, I want this from Meta. For years, even before Pico did this, they've been begging Meta to do this, and they haven't.
Well, my only comment is to Boz, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Wait until everybody's walking around drinking orange juice and your users aren't. Yeah, I don't know. This is funny because back in the day, a million years ago, I bought the Prio body tracker suit. Had like, I don't know, 20, 25 points of IMUs. You basically just, somebody took you by the forehead and dipped you into a bowl of IMUs and they just stuck to you wherever they decided. This is something different, though, because this has that sensor fusion where it actually is seeing light. And so it's giving an absolute position based on what the cameras on the headset can see. That's pretty cool. That makes it a lot easier to do. You don't have to have 60 million IMUs. And I mean, the calibration on those things, I mean, you'd start off and you'd be perfect T-pose, but then all of a sudden you'd be like, yee, and you'd be winding all over the place. So it's very difficult. So this is nice. I like this. Is definitely an upgrade to this concept.
Yeah, it's just such an incredibly well-made system. I was really surprised with this when I first tried it. That calibration is magical, right? You literally, none of that T-posing nonsense. You just look down, the headset sees they have these IR LEDs. It all just kind of works. There's no nonsense, no BS. It just works. And Onikazi is asking, like, is this just IMU? No, these aren't. These have IR LEDs, 12 IR LEDs on them. Now, the one flaw here, is that Pico 4 and Pico 4 Ultra, their tracking cameras actually don't see as downwards as Quest 3. So Pico 4 and Pico 4 Ultra have the Quest 2 tracking camera configuration of 4, one in each front corner. And so then they actually don't see as far down, whereas Quest 3 and 3S have these downwards facing side cameras that we talk about that they use for upper body tracking, right? So you do get upper body tracking through computer vision of actually like detecting, the shape of your arms and the shape of your torso. But if you had this on Quest 3 or 3S, this would be perfect because you would be able to see these things almost all the time. And they would actually have really high quality tracking that would be optical most of the time instead of just IMU. So it's like, that's what makes this triple frustrating if you're a Quest owner, because your headset would be better for this, much better than Pico 4. And Pico have done it anyway. So it's
well, while you were saying that, I was sitting here staring at my Pico 4, and yeah, I mean, the cameras just don't point down enough. So, geez.
Huge issue with that, right? Like, obviously, Pico 4 Ultra is pretty much just a souped up Pico 4 with a better chip and better color pass-through sensor suite. They didn't design it around this, right? That's kind of the issue there.
Did they mention if you could do more than 3 on this?
So I think it is limited to 3 for now, but I'll have to double check that. Actually, it would be interesting to see what is the limitation here. I do know that from like their SDK right now, in terms of setting it up as a user and getting a body pose by default, that is currently limited to 3 of these trackers.
So this requires, the waist tracker requires, if I read correctly, that you have to have the feet ones first.
Yeah.
In order for this to work. So if you were to put the feet ones on, like, I don't know, your wrists and then calibrate this thing, would it put your avatar upside down, do you think?
Yeah. It's designed.
Cool.
That's designed for these things to be in on
Look
your
out, VR chat. Here I come. Upside down Kyle the Gray.
Yeah, but again, to be clear, developers can customize this themselves. They can take these things out and use them as custom object trackers. And if you're doing that, then they can choose how to use this, right? They can do these custom things. You could do your elbows, for example, but the default kind of system software that's designed here is for these three. And I'll just see if I can find a damn image of a Pico 4 Ultra right here. Yeah, you can see how these cameras, these 4 tracking cameras here, are in the same kind of position as Quest 2, right? Where they're looking like mostly kind of slightly downwards, but mostly forwards. Whereas if you actually had these on a Quest 3, it would be so much better. And yeah. Let's see if I can bring up an image. Yeah, I'll bring up like a random image of Quest 3 here where you can see, look at these side cameras. This is literally like an almost downwards view, and you can see these little cameras. These side cameras on Quest 3 and 3S face a lot more down than people think, and that's how the inside-out upper body tracking works. That's how it uses these 2 cameras on the bottom. So, the issue with metas is that it isn't actually used in almost anything. And one of the reasons I've heard from developers talking here about the inside-out upper body tracking, the computer vision body tracking, is that it does have a small performance cost. It's not just tracking some IR LEDs like Pico's solution. This is doing a proper heavy computer vision model to figure out the position of your arms and your shoulders and your torso in the same way that it does hand tracking. So it also has like issues with low light, right? So just like any computer vision tracking system that's using visible light, if you're in a dark room, your inside out upper body tracking on Quest 3 isn't going to work well. With Picos, that's not an issue because, again, these are IR LEDs. You can see them in pitch dark. So, yeah, overall, it seems that when it comes to like, do developers actually use it? Is it something that is actually net useful and widely adopted? The advantage of Quests is that it's built in, but the advantage of Picos is that it has zero performance cost and works in any lighting. And Pico's pushing it as well, right? I don't know whether Pico's paying these developers to implement this, but it seems likely because like Blade and Sorcery Nomad doesn't use IOBT on Quest 3. It does use this here. Same thing with VR Chat. VR Chat does support these. It doesn't support Quest 3s. Drunken Bar Fight, though, it does support IOBT on Quest 3. So if you feel like virtually getting drunk and fighting someone, if playing the UploadVR drinking game and stumbling out to the next room isn't good enough for you, then,
exactly. That's funny. Yeah, no, these trackers could be I mean, they're not going to make or break the industry, but they could definitely bend the arc into a certain direction, I think.
Yeah, look, if you're in Europe right now and you're a VR chat player and you don't have the money to get right. So to start, if you don't want a gaming PC, you don't have the money for a gaming PC, you just want to play standalone VR and your thing is VR chat. It's the mobile version of VR chat, but that's what you want to play and you want a headset, you would get this, right? Of course you would. Like, if that's what you want to do. It becomes more complicated when you are on a PC because then you can obviously use Vive trackers and such like that. And, in that situation, I kind of say, if you don't want to have base stations and you don't want to have 100, if you don't want to pay the amount for one tracker that you pay for all of these together, then yeah, this is still a good option for you, right? The Pico 4, it's a great headset. It has virtual desktop. The Pico 4 Ultra is, also a great headset. It feels like the lenses are not quite as good as Quest 3, but they're better than Quest 3S. And, it's actually got taller field of view, better binocular overlap. It's a good headset. You wouldn't be like buying a Pico 4 Ultra and being like, I'm disappointed by this hardware. At least I wasn't. Maybe your mileage may vary. So that's a unique thing. But again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but in Europe, this is an option. In North America, it isn't. You can, of course, import it like you can import anything. But if your controller breaks, you're screwed. If you have a support issue, you're screwed. Pico will just tell you, you're not in a supported region. We can't legally provide you with support.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Ohio and I have a Pico 4, so
Yeah.
it can
But if your
happen.
controller dies, what are you going to do?
Have you buy me one and send it to me, I guess. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
exactly.
Oh boy. Well, it's crazy what you can do on the mobile headsets nowadays. It seems like nowadays there's just no difference between the desktop and mobile versions of things. Like, I mean, Half-Life Alyx, right? I mean, now that it's on Quest 3, everything's fine, right, David?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting technical project here. Essentially, if you somehow missed the news, a developer extracted the 3D assets and textures and sounds from the first level of Half-Life Alyx, brought them into Unity, did a lot of hard work that includes developing like custom shaders and processing scripts, added hand object interactions by using the Hurricane VR framework, faked the volumetric effects by using the package micro AVL, and then they exported it as an APK to run on Quest 3. And this even includes dynamic shadows. So a Quest 3's default render resolution with 2 times MSAA and fixed foveated rendering, which you can see quite clearly here, the fixed foveated rendering, right? That's, if you're wondering, like, why is it so pixely? It's only that FFR around the periphery. It's not in the center. This runs at a stable 72 frames per second when you're looking at some areas of the scene, and then drops down significantly to like 35, 40 when you're looking at others. So the developer here, who's done this, claims that these drops are due to the dense geometry and could be solved by simplifying 3D models used in some places. So essentially, they're saying that if someone, including Valve, was to simplify some of the 3D assets in this, you could run this at a smooth 72 on Quest 3 today. And so, this suggests that standalone headsets are a lot more powerful than we think. But we should put the caveat that this obviously doesn't include enemies. This isn't a combat scene. There's no like the complex game logic going on here. Um, Also, it could be that there are certain scenes of Half-Life Alyx that are more geometry dense than this, and that reducing the complexity of the geometry, the 3D models, simplifying them, would kind of ruin the artist's intention too much. But it does suggest that if Valve really, really wanted to, they could probably, if they wanted to, port Half-Life Alyx to Quest 3 and 3S, probably. And, you know, with Quest 3 and 3S, maybe, it's 72 frames per second and it's not too sharp, but future standalone headsets then should be able to run this quite well at a higher frame rate and a higher resolution. And of course, Valve may not be interested in porting to Meta Quest 3 for some obvious reasons, but Valve does have their own upcoming standalone headset, Valve Deckard. And recently we saw that leak that suggested that one of the proof of concept models used a chipset that is very similar to what is in Quest 3, a Qualcomm Snapdragon chipset that is, 1 year newer, that would have 25% higher performance. And so the suggestion is, could we see Valve port Half-Life Alyx to that? What I've said before on this podcast many times is that Deckard isn't going to be able to magically run existing PC VR games that have high fidelity out of the box, because it is a mobile headset, after all, a standalone headset. But we could see developers put work into developing like an ultra low graphics mode, a mode that does do this simplification of 3D models, and maybe some of and the effects, of course, the effects, because you see the volumetric effects here have to be sort of faked.
Would this run better since it's now in Unity? It could be ported to Vision Pro. Would this run better on Vision Pro?
It should, yes. That's very true. Not crazily better, because it doesn't use. If you're building a Unity app like this that is just kind of full control over rendering, you don't get eye tracking, so you can't actually do the foveated rendering on Vision Pro and something like this, which is crazy to think. So not actually that much better, but it could probably run a little bit better. Of course, with the caveat that you wouldn't have controllers for not.
Well, Right, but imagine Vision Pro 2 coming out with an M5. It would
Yeah, then
smoke
you could,
this. It
yeah,
would smoke this.
with the M5, yeah, you could probably get, you know, um, the caveat here is that the current Vision Pro can't do 72. It has to be 90 at minimum, I think. So that would be a little bit more demanding. But I think the GPU and CPU improvements would be such that that would be possible. And then, yeah, once you get the M5 Vision Pro 2, you maybe can start, doing some of these volumetric effects for real and not having to decimate the 3D models in quality. And you could run at higher resolution and things like that. So, yeah.
I like the idea that people are talking in the chat about, you don't necessarily just want a lower quality version of the same game, because that doesn't, like, you almost need to change the aesthetic and the tone of the game completely to better match the lower fidelity graphics. And I think that's a good point. I think a lot of games that end up getting ported to mobile, they just look like garbage. Some of them are decent, but most of them aren't.
Sure.
And this right here does not qualify. If somebody says, if I say to somebody, "Oh, have you ever played Half-Life Alyx?" and they say, "Oh, I played the first level on Quest 3." I'm not going to say, "Oh, well then you've truly experienced the game." I mean, it's not even close.
But it does look the same. That's the crazy part. Like, you can try the APK, and I did try the APK. It actually does look remarkably similar. It is the same 3D models, right? It's just in a different engine with some different shaders. There are some things that look a little bit worse, but the volumetric effects, if you really look, you can tell they're faked, but they're pretty good. Like, if you didn't know, you might actually never realize. But that's what really blows me away about this. It does look like Half-Life Alyx. It doesn't look like some ported version. It doesn't look like if you've ever played The Witcher 3 on the Nintendo Switch versus, the proper version on consoles and PC. It's not like that at all. This is Half-Life Alyx. Like, this is that same old balcony and that same old city, and even the hand interactions and things like that. But like, I don't know. It's remarkable that they can do this today. So there's one comment here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a comment here from CJ7 going, if Deckard comes out with a comparable chip to Quest 3, it'll be a huge disappointment. I'm wondering, like, what exactly do you want Deckard to have then?
Better than the Quest 3. Better than it needs to be a step up. If it's just on par, then it's too late to the game, I think is the point they're making.
Sure. But like, if it's newer, it will be, right? Because Quest 3 had the best GPU that was available in 2023 when it came out, the best mobile GPU available. And then it's 2025, so there'll be 2 years of improvements. But like, the order of improvement, if you use like the newer GPU that's available today, if we assume Deckard is coming out in 2025, it's, you're talking like 40-50% better. It is going to be
No, David, no. Don't you get it? Deckard is the chosen one, the one that was foretold by the prophecy that will fix all things. You will be able to throw your computer into the river, which is flooding right now because of the rain. You just chuck everything into the. You only need the Deckard, and that is all. Isn't that what the community is waiting for? The Deckard will be the know-all, end-all of headsets. I'm sorry if you don't hear the sarcasm in my voice, then I'll do /sarcasm right now, because Deckard is not going to be amazing like everybody thinks it's going to be. It's going to be marginally better.
Yeah, exactly. If when you come to what you can run on Deckard itself as a standalone headset, the laws of physics and the engineering constraints that exist here mean that there's no magic way that it's going to be like 10 times as powerful as a Quest 3. It's just not how this works, okay? If you have to run it off a battery that can either fit in your pocket or on your head, or both, I guess, and if it has to use GPUs that exist in reality, not magic GPUs, right? Valve is not a company that's developed its own GPUs, and there's no kind of magic way to get a super fast GPU from 10 years in the future that is going to come out of nowhere. It's going to be using, like, we've seen this leak of the POC using a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, right? 25% faster than what's in Quest 3. Like, people have this idea that like Quest 3, because it's affordable, is using some low-end GPU. No, it isn't. Quest 3 used the most powerful mobile GPU that a headset company who isn't Apple, because Apple doesn't sell their chips to anyone else, can have in 2023. There was no other GPU that will run for 2 hours off a battery that you can get. Like it's just not a thing. Like this is the crazy part I'm trying to say here. Like there is no magic GPU. People talk about like laptop GPUs. Laptops have batteries that are like 3, 4, 5 times the size of a Quest 3's battery, and they have a huge sort of thermal dissipation area with giant, larger fans. And if you've ever owned a gaming laptop, you'll know to actually get to full power, you need to be running it off the mains power, pulling in hundreds of watts instead of, the regular battery. So like, you know, if you want to wear a backpack, if Deckard is a backpack, sure, okay. But like if it's something you have to wear on your head, it's going to be a mobile device, right? And like that's the problem here. But
I
again,
love
I
this.
want to say, I want to quickly say this. I expect that Deckard will focus on using your gaming PC. Valve owns Steam. Steam already exists. If you're a Steam user, you have a gaming PC or a gaming laptop. It will be focused primarily, most likely, on streaming from your gaming PC. And that's where, if you want to run Half-Life Alyx on maxed out settings at 4K resolution, that's where you do that. You don't come up with some magic out of the ether mobile GPU that can magically do that.
Yeah, CJ7 says it has to be better in some major way, or they won't be able to justify the $1,200 or even $800 cost for that matter. Yeah, they will, because it's going to be the Deckard, and the diehards will buy it immediately. It could be inferior in hardware perspective, and people would still buy it. Fanboys are like that. Nothing wrong with that.
But I do think it can still be superior in some ways, right? Quest 3 is in many ways optimized for cost, right? It comes in the box with a cheap like cloth strap that is not sufficient. You could imagine having, an Elite strap out of the box in Deckard that has got very high quality padding. Eye tracking is something that could be there that isn't in the box in Quest 3. More RAM, higher quality pass through, more tracking cameras, things like that. There's a lot you can do there. And obviously, that doesn't even come down to like the display, right? Quest 3 uses a 2K LCD. Deckard could use a 2.5K or 3K LCD with mini LED backlighting, right, for local dimming, or it could even use micro OLED at 3K or 4K or 2.5K, whatever. It could use micro OLED panels that blow away what you see in Quest 3, right? So even though I'm saying it likely will be in the same realm of computing power as Quest 3, maybe 50% more powerful or 70% at most or something, right? Or if you take into account eye tracking. But it's like it can still be better in a lot of other ways, right? The Index, if you look at it as a piece of hardware, like it wasn't that it was like dramatically fundamentally better than something like a Vive Pro at the time, right? Like Index actually had lower resolution than Reverb G2, but it did a lot of things right. It had a wide field of view. It had great audio. That's another thing, right? Quest 3 has those little built-in speakers. Deckard could have proper off-ear audio. It had great tracking, great controllers. It had, really good padding, industrial design. There's a lot of things that you can do that without somehow... Deckard could still be a fantastic headset without pulling off the magical fantasy of PC VR, but without needing a PC.
We'll see. I like the comments where people are like, oh yeah, you can put a 5090. It's got a slot where you can put a GTX 5090 right into the headset, and then it'll double as a George Foreman grill too to cook beautiful steaks.
Yeah, and you get to experience Half-Life Alyx completely standalone without a PC for all of 90 seconds before the battery runs out. Right?
Yeah, and your eyes catch on fire. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So, I mean, we'll see. I know we weren't actually talking about Deckard, but I mean, having Half-Life Alyx on a Quest 3 kind of invokes that headset into the conversation.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Alyx isn't that demanding, right? Like it was designed to be it was very well optimized. It doesn't use like crazy amounts of dynamic lighting. Most of it is baked. It is sort of not, it doesn't have a crazy density of dynamic objects and things like that. It is a well optimized game. It runs on PCs that were relatively mid-range for gaming PCs back in 2020, when it
Sure.
came out.
I look forward to seeing Half-Life Alyx being someday ported to the TI graphing calculator, because that seems to be the measurement of success for most games.
Yeah. I mean, we should briefly address, like, do we think it will actually get ported to Quest? No. And I don't think it'll get ported to Vision Pro either.
No. Right.
Reason being, if that was something Valve was interested in, they would have ported it to PlayStation VR2 already. Realistically, Valve wants you to be on Steam. That's all Valve cares about. It's the reason that Valve doesn't even care about Quest 3. Valve doesn't think Quest 3 is a competitor because people can buy a Quest 3, install Steam Link, and connect to Steam VR in 2 clicks. This is why we have to get out of this mindset that Meta and Valve are hardware competitors, because they're not. Like, on a platform level, yeah, of course. But Half-Life Alyx is a game that you buy on Steam, and you use Steam VR to access it. And that, for all of those reasons, I don't see Valve bringing it to any platform. Because again, PlayStation VR2 could run it. PlayStation 5 could run this game already. It could have. It could have been a launch title. A lot of people speculated about it every single time Sony had, whatever they call their showcases. Every single person in the industry was like, well, this is the one they're going to show Alyx. Alyx is coming now. But what's the advantage to Valve? They want
You're right. No, you're good point. Good point. Well, David, this has been a good conversation. My battery is about to die, and I feel like our audience is ready to move on and maybe go watch Don playing Civ 7. He is a Civ virgin, so be gentle, be nice to him, and help him through it, walk him through it, make it a good experience his first time.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see him play Civ in that format. Hopefully it's not too frustrating in VR.
I know. I'm actually kind of jealous. The first experience in Civ is VR. That's fun. All right. So as usual, I want to make sure everybody goes and checks out UploadVR.com and signs up and become a free member, so you can at least leave comments, and you can be a paid member, and you can have an ad-free experience, which is awesome. And then there is also the option to become a patron and really, truly support us and have your name mentioned on the show each week. A lot of fun. Other than that, David, I
think that's
anything
it.
else fun and exciting? Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We're really appreciative of you being here in the comments. Thanks for the discussion. I'm going to have to start and get to the UK heat level, or I'm going to have to figure out an air conditioning solution in this room, because even after this time, this is getting hot in here. So yeah, I'm going to have to bow out now anyway, but we've got through all our topics. We've had a great discussion. Please let us know in the comments what you think about Civ 7, about any of our topics today. And thanks so much, everyone, for your time.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see you in the future. Bye-bye.